everyone. The Government Operations and Elections Committee will come to order. Just a couple of ground rules. If you could, so that we can get all of our testimony on tape, if you could try to keep quiet in the audience to the extent that you can, meaning no clapping, those types of things. It's distracting for the members and it causes static on our tape. So if you could avoid doing that after you hear somebody testify for or against the bill, that would be very helpful. Another housekeeping type of item, since we do have quite a few people that are going to testify for and against, we're going to try to limit that testimony to 2 or 3 minutes, so please keep your comments very short. And then I guess the third thing I would mention is that the Government Operations and Elections Committee does not have, it has jurisdictions over parts of the bill. As you know, different committees look at different parts of the bill. So anybody testifying, please try to limit your comments to the articles of the bill. And I think at this time, before we even move the bill, I'll turn it over to Deb Dyson, who will explain to us and the members in the audience what items we're particularly looking at in the Government Operations and Elections Committee. Now, keep in mind, if this bill should pass tonight, there'll be other opportunities for this bill to be heard in taxes where you can look at those types of issues, and then Ways and Means. So try to just keep your comments limited to our sections. And Ms. Dyson, if you could explain that to us.
Madam Chair and members, the portions of the bill that are of specific interest to the Committee on Government Operations and Elections would include Articles 1 and 3 that create the Minnesota Stadium Authority, and then also abolish the Sports Facilities Commission and make various conforming changes. In Article 4, which relates to the Minneapolis Convention Center and the local sales taxes and allocation of revenues, Section 4 provides that any actions of the city under the article are exempt from the city charter provisions. Section 5 requires the City Council to approve the legislation for it to take effect. And then Section 7 provides that the sales tax provisions are exempt from referendum requirement in statute. In Article 6, cities of the first class are authorized to use their excess general sales tax revenues for convention center sports facility. And then it also provides for the amateur sports use of the football stadium. And then finally, in Article 7, there are 4 blink-on, blink-off revenue sources that are they're backup and that MMB can turn on and off. And Section 3 provides for use of the Hennepin County sales tax revenues, which were authorized for the Twins ballpark. And those are the provisions that I think are of particular interest to this committee.
And just to note on that, too, I believe that up front the pages made available copies of the provisions of this bill that apply to this committee, so feel free to grab one of those in case you were going to be testifying, so that you're testifying to the correct portions of the bill. With that, do we have someone who would like to move the bill?
Madam Chair,
Representative Nelson.
I'd like to move House File 2810 to be passed and moved to taxes.
Could you restate your motion, Representative Nelson?
It's to move it, is that House File 2810 is to be passed and moved to taxes. Is that the proper amendment?
If that is your amendment, to recommend it to pass, or just you're asking for you recommend to pass and go to taxes?
Yes.
That's your amendment. Okay, so moved. Representative Lanning, we'll turn it over to you.
And Madam Chair, I was told that there's a technical amendment that the author has. Does he need that put on now?
Excuse me?
Madam Chair, I was told that there's a technical amendment the author needs to have put on the 2810 A20 amendment.
Okay. So moved.
Madam Chair, that is correct. The A20 amendment is technical, and Mr. McCormick from House Research can explain the amendment to you. And then we just discovered a bit ago that we need to have an oral amendment to that technical amendment as well that Ms. Dyson will address. So, Madam Chair, Mr. McCormick can explain the amendment.
Welcome, Mr. McCormick. If you could explain the amendment.
Members, Patrick McCormick from House Research. The 820 amendment is a number of just very small technical changes. I first want to start by noting that Representative Lanning is going to incorporate some oral changes to the amendment. So the first oral change is on page 1, we're going to strike lines 1.4 through 1.7. Those changes are not going to be done at this time. They're still being worked out, and so they may come back at a later date. The second oral change to the amendment is on page 6, on the back side of the amendment. And on page 6, line 5, we're just making some technical adjustments to fit to the bill, and the reviser has suggested that we make a couple changes here. So after the word insert, it's going to now say insert, comma, 349.15 subdivision 3, comma, and 349.19 subdivision 2A R. And I think Ms. Dyson and the committee LA have those oral changes. And with those changes, what the amendment does is it corrects some internal cross-references that were mislabeled after the Commerce Committee stop. It makes some adjustments to the existing tax language in the lawful gambling chapter to conform to the tax rates that are in the bill. On page 5, it adjusts the language for a dedicated amount that is going to problem gambling from the tax receipts, and the language has shifted between this bill and House File 1485, Representative Creasels, and this puts the correct language in place for there. And the remainder of the changes are, once again, technical changes that are recommended by either the Department of Revenue or the reviser.
Representative Nelson, would you like to incorporate those oral changes?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move House File Amendment 820 amendment with those oral amendments incorporated.
Does everyone understand the 820 amendment? Any questions or comments? All those in favor of the oral amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion does prevail. Now is the bill in the shape that you would like, Representative Lanning?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you this evening. I see there's a little bit of interest in this subject. There has been a lot of interest in this subject for a long time. In fact, I first started talking with people about this issue 7 years ago. And over the last 7 years, there have been 4 times that a bill has come forward. The first time was in 2006. A bill was introduced, and it ended up not passing. It died in one of the committees. In 2010, a bill was introduced, and that bill as well stalled in a committee. And then last year we had a bill that I introduced, that we knew was going to take a lot of work. And over the last year, we have spent a considerable amount of time trying to put together a bill that we think had a much better chance of getting support of the state. I can say, having worked on all 4 of those bills, that this clearly is the best proposal that we've had to this point. This proposal has had more work and effort going into it than any of the other past bills that have come forward. It has been vetted more, it's been tested more than any other bill. And members, my goal here is that we need to get this issue on the floor of the House and the Senate, where the members can once and for all decide whether we're going to do something relative to the stadium issue or not. And if we don't get it to the House floor, to the Senate floor, members, this issue is going to linger. It's going to continue to be on people's minds, both those who are for it and those who are opposed to it. And I think we owe it to everyone. I think we owe it to the people of Minnesota to once and for all get this issue resolved, either favorably or not. In the last year, a number of sites were evaluated by those of us that have worked on this issue. You're aware of the fact that the team entered into an agreement, negotiated an agreement with Ramsey County, and as it turned out that there became some problems with aspects of that proposal, and so the team decided to look at the possibility of a Minneapolis agreement. And over the course of many, many months, there was extensive negotiations going on between the team, the City of Minneapolis, representatives of the state, the Metropolitan Sports Facilities Commission, and the charitable organizations who are, as you know, working with the electronic pull tabs and electronic bingo. Now, I want to point out that throughout this time, this has been a bipartisan work effort. We've known all the way along that this bill would never make it unless there was bipartisan support, because we've also known that there's bipartisan opposition. And we've gotten it to the point where now, members, what you have before you, the City of Minneapolis, a majority of the City Council of Minneapolis, has indicated that they are in support of the language in this bill as it relates to the city. And we also have an agreement from the organized charities who are looking for some significant tax relief in order to help generate more revenue for the charities and for the state in order to pay for this proposal. Let me quickly review the overall funding scenario, which has been well publicized. This proposal would have the team offering $427 million towards the $975 million cost. Over the life of this, the team would end up paying slightly over half of the cost of this facility. The state would contribute $398 million, and the City of Minneapolis $150 million. Now, the means for funding the state portion of this would be, as we've mentioned, the electronic pull tabs and bingo. We have estimates from the Gambling Control Board as well as revenue. The Revenue Department has thoroughly examined these revenue projections, and they have indicated that they have complete confidence in the $72 million in additional revenue that this proposal would fund. That revenue would enable us to extend significant tax relief to the charities. The charities have been telling us that they're losing locations because they're not able to make the ends meet. They're not able to generate the revenue that they need, and so they've been losing sites. This would provide the kind of tax relief that they have been looking for. And then in addition, this revenue would cover the principal and interest on the bonds that would be sold in order to pay for the state's portion of this project. Now, I want to point out this was something that came to be along the way. It was not a part of the original plan, and that is that the team is being required to come up with $7.5 million a year for the first 5 years to cover the City of Minneapolis's operational costs and contribution that they would make to the reserve fund. The state is not going to have to come up with that revenue in the first 5 years, but then once the convention center bonds are paid off, the state would be in a position to reimburse the team for those upfront costs that they have provided for the first 5 years. Now, there have been questions raised about what if the $72 million turns out not to be a correct projection. And as a result, we have been talking all along about other potential revenue sources that could help us meet the needs that we have to make bond payments. And this bill that you have before you has what's called some blink-on, blink-off provisions. And they are in this order, that if need be, the Commissioner of Management and Budget would be authorized to impose a 10% tax on luxury boxes where the users of the facility would help to provide that revenue for it. Secondly, a sports-themed lottery, which has been in place before, and that projected revenue would be about a little over $2 million. The 10% tax on luxury boxes would be $2.3 to $2.4 million a year. The third item is to capture some of the excess revenue that's coming in on the Twin Stadium, the Hennepin County revenue. This is revenue over and above what's needed to make those bond payments. And fourth, there would be a 10% admissions tax for all the people attending the games would pay another 10% in cost to help provide additional revenue. Now, these four items, and it's a little difficult to estimate, especially on the Hennepin County proposal, would probably be in at least $9 million to $11 million a year in additional revenue that could be available if need be. With that, I wanted to give you that overview. Person that I've been working with here along the way on this, Representative Morrow, I'll let him at this point make some comments, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Representative Lanning. Welcome to the committee, Representative Morrow. Please proceed.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. I will keep this short because I know there are a lot of people here and a lot of legitimate questions that need to be asked and need to be answered. I thought I would just give you 5 points that have helped me think through why I'm here right now. Point number one, to me, this is a quality of life issue in Minnesota. Whether one is a Vikings fan or not, I think we all know that we have friends, family, neighbors who are. Others will speak tonight to the degree to which Minnesotans love the Vikings, pay attention to the Vikings, watch the Vikings, and listen. I would note, though, that this stadium would not only be contributing to the quality of life in terms of keeping the Vikings in Minnesota, but there are other events, other activities that would occur in this facility. And I'm sure we'll be talking about those tonight as well. Point number two, will the team leave? Because I agree with everyone who says if the team will not leave, then we need not do anything. And my belief, after being in the years of conversations that Representative Lanning has described, is that the Vikings will not play another 10, 20, 30 years in the Metrodome. I do not believe that. So I do believe we have to make a decision. And again, there are reasonable positions on both sides. But if I thought the team would play here for another 30 years, I would not be sitting in this chair right now. They will not play, in the Metrodome another 30 years. So if we want to maintain that aspect of Minnesota's quality of life, point number one, and if you believe that the team has a reasonable chance of leaving without it, question number three to me is then what is a reasonable cost and what are the reasonable sources of payment to maintain that quality of life in Minnesota for years to come? Representative Lanning has described a mechanism that both helps charities in Minnesota and helps pay for a stadium. When I look at question number three, I also ask myself, what happens to the state of Minnesota economically if the team leaves? And there are scores of articles on both sides, but one number I come back to again and again is $560 million. $560 million. The Vikings players, staff, and opponents over the next 30 years will pay $800 million or more in state income tax. 70% of the team's revenue comes from out of state. Most of it is from New York City. It's the revenue sharing on the TV contract. So what I did was simple. I multiplied $800 million times 70%, and that out-of-state money will follow the team no matter where it goes. So if the team leaves, we will have that hole in our state budget. We could talk a little bit about that number, but it will be a sizable number because the TV money will follow the team. Point number four, is there a viable local partner that both benefits from the arrangement and has the capacity to contribute to the arrangement? I leave it to a local partner to determine whether it has economic benefits and quality of life benefits. And I believe the local partners who've come to the table have determined for themselves that there are economic and quality of life benefits that justify their partnership. It's not for me to tell them they're wrong. They can decide that. There are also the benefit of jobs. And certainly we know that there are many people looking to work, sitting on the bench, waiting anxiously for work. And we know a project this size would be helpful. And then point number 5 for me, the benefit to the charities. Because I'll be completely honest, if this simply was a bill in my eyes to help billionaires pay millionaires, I would not be sitting next to Representative Lanning. But one key component of this bill that was heard in the Commerce Committee, and Madam Chair, I'm grateful to you for outlining what the purview of your committee is, but one thing that we debated and discussed in the Commerce Committee was the gaming provisions of the bill. And I do believe that our charities and the organizations they contribute to will benefit if we can get this done. And with that, Madam Chair, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Representative Lanning, would you like to move on to some of your other testifiers then?
Madam Chair?
Certainly.
Oh, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I need to amend my motion, original motion, that I move that this pass without recommendation and be moved or be referred to taxes.
Okay, Representative Nelson moves that this recommended to pass without recommendation and move to taxes. So moved. Back to you, Representative Lanning. Would you like to start with Mr. Bagley?
Certainly. You have
I have a list in front of me. I'll just
Madam
follow
Chair,
that then.
And we would like to provide those who are here in support of this an opportunity to testify. Thank you.
We're not recommending it as pass, but it's passing it on here without recommendation. Or when you recommend it pass. It's the next one. So we'll just set percent with recommendation one way or the other.
Welcome to the committee. If you could just identify yourself for the tape.
Madam Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Lester Bagley, Vice President of Public Affairs and Stadium Development for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm joined by Steve Poppin, our Vice President of Finance and Chief Financial Officer. We have a few brief comments to make, and then would certainly be available to answer questions from members. We have distributed a packet of information, including a presentation to the committee, but in the interest of time, we'll just dispense with the presentation, make a couple of brief remarks going forward. But, Madam Chair, members, we appreciate this hearing tonight. We appreciate your willingness to move the stadium discussion forward. We're grateful to Representative Lanning and Representative Morrow and the bipartisan group of legislators for their ongoing work to assemble this legislation. Appreciative of Governor Dayton and the 4 caucus leaders at the legislature for their leadership, and appreciative of the business community, organized labor, and our fans for standing with us on this long running discussion. After 10-plus years, the Vikings and the NFL believe that it is time to bring the stadium proposal forward to let the entire House vote on the bill, something that has never happened. The Vikings have worked hard and negotiated in good faith a term sheet with state leaders, the bill authors, local leaders that should resolve this issue. We have worked through every single issue and obstacle that has been put in front of us. The site issue, we have in front of us the most cost-efficient site of all those analyzed. The stadium finance plan that works without raising taxes or using general fund money. And we have the local support, as Representative Lanning has mentioned, the Minneapolis Mayor Ryback, City Council President Johnson, and a majority of the members of the Minneapolis City Council. We have a proposal that meets the objectives and the directives that we have been given by state leaders. A proposal, again, that uses it has no tax increases, no general fund revenue. It has the Vikings covering half of the costs when you account for the operating costs and the upfront capital costs of the facility. There's a tremendous opportunity to create thousands of jobs and to secure the Vikings for the next generation. While the Metrodome has been a great asset to the state, it no longer works for Minnesotans. It's the smallest stadium in the NFL in terms of square footage. We're at the bottom of the league in revenue generation and opportunity to generate revenue, as well as fan experience. We will never get another NCAA Final Four or regional tournament in this market unless this issue is resolved. And the Metrodome will not sustain an NFL team. The couple quick points about the site. Again, it's the most cost-efficient site. The existing infrastructure is there. The Hiawatha light rail line and the central corridor, which will open in 2014, connect on the doorstep of this facility. It offers the shortest construction time frame, and it has a tremendous fan experience. It will offer a great game day experience for our fans that has been sorely lacking. We've only had one concern about the Metrodome site, and that is the potential of having to play for 3 seasons at TCF Bank Stadium. By the work with the engineers and the Sports Commission, the city, and the state leadership, we think that by moving the stadium site as far east as possible on the Metrodome site, that will limit the time, the games, the years that we would have to play at TCF Bank Stadium, potentially to 1 season or a little more than that. There's no doubt that the Vikings are Minnesota's team. More than half of the residents follow the Vikings. Our residents in Minnesota follow the Vikings every season. Over the last 3 seasons, the team has averaged a 65 television share, which means 65% of the televisions are tuned to Viking games. When you add our radio audience of more than 700,000 and the 63,000 at the stadium, approximately 3 million Minnesotans follow the Vikings every Sunday. There's no other entertainment or happening in Minnesota that can come close to that. The team provides and has real economic impact. By having an NFL team in this market, we are the recipients of revenue sharing, which comes into this market. More than $130 million annually comes into Minnesota because we have an NFL team. We have approximately 52,000 season ticket owners, and in the process of renewing and selling tickets right now. But 27% of our season ticket owners in 2011 live outside the state of Minnesota. There's no doubt that when our fans come on weekends, you notice it at the Mall of America, you notice it in this Twin Cities market. Our fans stay in hotels, shop, and dine here, and there's a considerable economic impact. The fact that the Vikings have paid in 2010 about $20 million, approximately $20 million in taxes, the but-for taxes. Representative Morrow referred to these. When you count all the taxes the team paid, and they would not be paid without the team in the state. Last couple points. The Metrodome, we believe, has paid it forward. The stadium, current stadium, was built for $55 million and with $33 million in public money. The state of Minnesota contributed zero to the Metrodome. And since it has opened, the Metrodome has generated $360 million in tax revenues since 1982. $340 million has gone to the state of Minnesota. So the state of Minnesota contributed zero, but in return has generated the Metrodome has generated, with its teams and economic activity, more than $340 million to the state. The Vikings/private contribution, the term sheet and the agreement negotiated over a period of months with state, local leaders, has the team contributing $427 million up front and $13 million annually for operating capital expenses. That $427 million upfront contribution is the largest team and private contribution, or the third largest team and private contribution in the history of the NFL. The capital expenses, the ongoing $13 million for game day operating and capital improvement account, is the largest rent payment in the NFL if for this bill were to go forward. So the third largest capital contribution and the largest rent payment in the league. The members, thank you for your time and for listening to the testimony tonight. Again, we'd be happy to stand for questions. I would argue that the Vikings have been patient. We have done everything that has been asked and required. We stood down 6 years ago when the Minnesota Twins ballpark and the University of Minnesota football stadium moved forward. We have negotiated in good faith and delivered a fair deal that has the team in for half of the costs. And we have a great opportunity to create a multi-purpose facility, a first-class facility a building that will be owned by the public, managed and operated by the public, and used by everyone in the state. We would respectfully request your support to move the bill forward and let the entire Minnesota House have an opportunity to vote on the legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Poppin?
I stand for questions.
Okay. Any questions from members? Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Bagley. Just a question that is frequently out there. You might as well answer it for the record. Why should the state of Minnesota contribute a stadium for a billionaire who could pay for it all himself?
Mr. Bagley.
Madam Chair, Representative Erdahl, thank you for the question. The stadium is, as I concluded, it will be owned by the public, used by everyone. The Metrodome has had 90 million people through it in the 30 years since it opened. It's truly a statewide asset. A lot of high school sports, high school soccer, baseball, football, cheerleading teams that some of their highlights of their careers have been playing on the field where the Vikings play, where the Twins used to play. The facility is not a private facility. It is. We have in front of us an opportunity to leverage the third largest private contribution up front and to make sure that we have a facility that can be used by everyone going forward in all the events that are consistent with what are currently occur at the Metrodome.
Thank you. Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bagley, and perhaps this actually is a question for Mr. Mondale, but I remember several months ago when Arden Hills, the Ramsey County team, stepped forward as a local partner and identified a site, identified several possible funding sources, and I was approached as chair of the Transportation Committee about certain transportation infrastructure costs that were deemed to be necessary because there was, I believe, a Met Council overview process that identified some alleged deficiencies in the traffic patterns and so on. Would you like me to have the Met Council trigger that again, or should we bring it to the Transportation Committee? Because, as I mentioned at that time, I was somewhat skeptical of the insistence that we needed $300 million worth of highway improvements if Arden Hills was to be chosen. My question is, has the same yardstick been used to measure this site for transportation ingress and egress? I haven't heard anything about it, and I'm not aware that the Met Council was asked to survey anything in Minneapolis for moving people in and out as per NFL standards.
Mr. Bagley?
Madam Chair, Representative Beard, thank you for the question. I would defer to the Met Council and perhaps to the Sports Commission on that question. I think one key difference between the Arden Hills site and the current existing site is that our games have been played at this site for 30 years. Our fans are used to going there. I think there's traffic and transportation that serves the site, and that's our belief. But I would defer to the experts as to whether or not it has the same yardstick that Arden Hills has had.
Madam Chair, rather
Representative
than disrupt Mr. Bagley while he's here and other questions that may want to be asked, is the Met Council or Mr. Mondale on the testifier? Because I could hold that list, because I could hold that question.
Mr. Mondale is on the list. I'm not sure if he's here.
I'll wait until he comes forward and we'll ask him the same question. So,
okay. Representative Skelzy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of curious. I've heard, I'm wondering what is the value of the naming rights, and I've heard 150 million, I've heard 400 million, and I know that there's people who have said what they assume it is. I'm, though, assuming that if this has gotten this far, somebody knows what those naming rights are worth. So I'm assuming that they're not negotiated further. I'm wondering what those naming rights, what the naming rights for the stadium is worth.
Mr. Poppin? And I don't know if you've identified yourself yet for the tape.
My name's Steve Poppin, P-O-P-P-E-N. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Chief Financial Officer for the Vikings. Madam Chair, Representative, naming rights, we have not negotiated naming rights. for this stadium. So there is a list of naming rights that are out there that could be looked at as comparables. They range anywhere from $5 million to $7.5 million, probably, for markets of our size on an annual basis. There are some naming rights that are out there in larger cities that are for larger amounts. But I would say anywhere from $4.5 million to $7.5 million per year.
Follow-up? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bagley. I think we've had this conversation many times over the years, so I'm going to ask you the question that I typically ask you, which is, I've researched several cities that have had mostly privately financed facilities, a significantly more private contribution than in your current proposal. And as a matter of fact, the teams themselves have talked about how significant it's been for them in terms of an advantage. For example, the St. Louis Cardinals website actually talks about, very recently they wrote, in terms of their new ballpark, Busch Stadium in downtown St. Louis, in an era when most sports facilities had been built with mostly public funds, the Cardinals deal was unusual and involved relatively little public assistance. And they go on to say that, they're doing very well. There was an article in the Pittsburgh paper back when Heinz Field was being, I think shortly after Heinz Field was constructed, about the Patriots. And they write, after years of trying to get Massachusetts taxpayers to foot the bill, even threatening to move the team to Hartford, the New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft became just the third NFL team owner to build his own stadium. Kraft borrowed $452 million. He faces $20 million in annual debt payments, but the new stadium is generating $40 million a year just from sponsorships and premium seating sales. And the article continues by saying, by conventional wisdom for financing sports stadiums, Kraft should be crying poor. That conventional wisdom says that teams, no matter what the sport, can't possibly pay for a new stadium and remain competitive. And I don't like the Patriots at all, don't get me wrong here, but they have been competitive and have done well over the years. And then finally, Stacy Slaughter, who was the vice president of the San Francisco Giants, was quoted in an NPR story in 2004 saying, while the team fought long and hard for a public subsidy, they eventually, they couldn't get it after repeated attempts. And she says that paying for the stadium on its own has been, for the most part, a good deal. And that Pacific Bell Park in San Francisco is 90% financed by the team. So I'm kind of wondering about your comments about this, because I don't think it's a unusual or radical idea to have a mostly privately financed. I don't think any of these are 100%. I think San Francisco is 90%. The New England Stadium had some public expense for some infrastructure improvements around the stadium, I think, as was the case with Busch. So I'm interested in your thoughts about these three case studies.
Mr. Bagley?
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, thank you for a question, and there has been a number of discussions along these lines. In fact, as I mentioned up front, 10-plus years of discussion about whether or not to move forward on a Viking stadium and secure the team for the next generation. 10-plus years have done nothing but triple the cost. We're now approaching $975 million. When we began this conversation, the stadium was in the ballpark of the costs of New England Stadium, of the costs of other stadiums. So first is the length of debate and delay has only increased the cost. Second point is market size has a lot to do with the ability and purchasing power and the ability of markets to fund privately these facilities. The example you give in San Francisco, a large market compared to this, a small to medium-sized market. You can look at the list, and I think the Sports Commission and Chairman Mondale have a list of all of the NFL stadiums, what they cost, what the public-private share has been, and they vary across the board, from Cincinnati, which was 100% publicly funded, to Indianapolis was nearly 90% publicly funded in, again, northern climate, mid-market cities. So if you look at the list, they're across the board, but market size does have a bearing. So all of these issues, all of these stadiums are funded differently, and we've suggested every single one, different one as to how we could solve this issue. The one thing that is consistent is that each one of these deals is a public-private partnership. In New England, there was the infrastructure piece, but I think, again, up front, you can't dispute the numbers for the $975 million proposal. The Vikings are offering $427 million up front, the third largest private contribution in the history of the NFL, and $13 million a year, which will be the highest rent payment for an NFL team that is a tenant that does not operate the facility. We would be a tenant under the proposal that's in front of you. So I don't know if Mr. Poppin has any additional responses, but market size and purchasing power and public-private partnerships are the way these issues are resolved.
Follow-up? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up. They supplemented the team's revenue with a loan in New England. I believe in St. Louis, the business community really stepped up, and I know there's some representatives here, and maybe I could ask them this question. But I noticed in reading the bill that you do have a provision for individuals and others to make contributions, I think, to buy, bricks of some kind. And, maybe that's a mechanism for our business community, our thriving business community that's doing quite well, to supplement your private contribution. Has there been thought to really asking the business community to step up in a much more significant way, as I think was done in St. Louis? Because, again, we have a thriving business community, that you have a mechanism in the bill to make contributions. And I'm not talking about, $100 or $200, but, perhaps millions. And so what have you thought about that? And again, I'll ask some of the representatives from the business community, but I'm interested in your thoughts about their contribution to this.
Mr. Bagley?
Defer to Mr. Poppin.
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative, the business community in the state of Minnesota really has, we're anticipating them stepping up, and that is one of the reasons why we were able to get to the contribution level that we were at with at $427 million. In addition to that, for a stadium where we have 10 dates in the facility, it's a multi-purpose facility that's going to house amateur events, Final Fours, other events, high school athletics. We have committed to pay 60% of the operating costs. That's the highest level of rent payment, up to $13 million towards operations. That's the highest in the NFL for a team that does not have control of the facility. So we are anticipating the business community stepping up through sponsorships and through naming rights to allow us to do what we've committed to do.
One last one.
Representative Hornstein.
So what would be the amount of, beyond the naming rights, and what would be the amount that you anticipate? You said you anticipate additional business support. Have you accounted for that, or is that just still something that's being developed?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative, it's a combination of naming rights, it's a combination of buying the suites at the stadium, it's a combination of club seats at the stadium, and advertising in the facility.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Mr. Bagley or Mr. Poppin, could you address the number of jobs that you would see associated with this facility, perhaps in the construction phase, as well as additional jobs because of the new venue and your operations at the new facility compared to what you're doing at the Metrodome? That seems to be a pretty hot topic around the legislature these days.
Mr. Bagley.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, I think Mortensen Construction is here, and I think members of the construction trades are also here and available to testify on the impact of jobs. This is very clearly is the jobs package. The estimates that have been provided include 7,500 construction jobs, or 3.4 million man-hours for the construction of the project. And then on the ongoing operation to operate the facility, there's about 3,400 ongoing jobs. And again, I think members of organized labor as well as business leaders can address those issues more directly.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bagley, jobs that you have at the Metrodome or jobs associated with the Vikings organization right now, and then with the new facility, I missed that if you shared that information.
Mr. Bagley?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, the number of jobs at the Metrodome approximately currently that support the Vikings on an annual basis, for our games there is approximately 2,800 jobs. So I think the conservative estimate of a new facility without considering the opportunity to bring a Major League Soccer team to this market and play in this facility, or to get back the NCAA Final Four and some of these other national, international events, which we won't get back unless we resolve this issue. So the estimate of 3,400 jobs, the net is 600 jobs, in new jobs ongoing, based on the analysis completed by Mortensen and the building and construction trades.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go, I guess. Oh, Senator Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bagley, I didn't have a chance to look through your folder in detail. We just got it as you were presenting. But can you share with us an estimate of the value of the Vikings now versus the value of the Vikings after a stadium bill would be enacted?
Mr. Poppin?
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, it's difficult to say what that would be at this point. We have not done a valuation of the club on what it is right now, but the last team to sell was the St. Louis Rams for $750 million. I shouldn't say that. There was a more recent team in Jacksonville that just sold. I believe it was in the $600 million range. But so we have not done a valuation on what that appreciation value would be. However, in the bill, we have accounted for the appreciation of the team in the case that the team was sold. So to prevent a flip from an owner of profiting from a new stadium being approved and then selling the club to make a profit, that has been accounted for in the bill.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Poppin, or Mr. Bagley, the reason I asked the question is you've presented this proposal by citing other stadium deals, and this is the third largest team contribution, the team paying X percent and so forth. And you've also stated that this is a public facility. To Representative Erdahl's question about why taxpayers in Minnesota should be subsidizing billionaires who could do this on their own. And I think the question, putting aside the question of whether it should be done, the second question should be, is this a good deal for Minnesota taxpayers? Are we subsidizing more than we need to? Because when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, we should be trying to subsidize the least amount possible in order to get the outcome that we want. We shouldn't be throwing money or leaving money on the table for the Vikings to pick up. As far as I understand, the Vikings are a cash flow positive organization with a significant market value, and whose market value is going to increase significantly if a stadium is proposed. So the question is, how do we, as representatives of public taxpayers, how do we know we're getting a good deal? Not in comparison to what other deals have been done. How do we know, just in straight dollars and cents, that we're getting a good deal, that we're not over-subsidizing this stadium, that the Vikings aren't going to be realizing a windfall, both on an annual cash basis and an asset valuation basis? How do we know we're getting a good deal if we don't know how much you're going to make from this?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, we believe that 50% life cycle cost towards construction and the stadium and operations of the stadium is a good deal for Minnesota. I know you don't want to compare it to other cities or locales where stadiums have been purchased, but if you do look at Midwest cities where these stadiums have been built, we are on the high end at 50%. Most of these are more in the anywhere from 60 to 70% public funded, if you're looking at more of the Midwest cities that Minneapolis would fall into. The Vikings are not cash flow positive as we currently stand, so that's I'm not sure where you receive that information, but that's not the case. So we are $40 million behind the league average in revenues in this market under the current Metrodome situation. So it is not a situation where it is such a windfall that that the public is losing out. We are there to help support and ensure that other activities, economic development to the community, as well as high school league and amateur sports are supported in a new facility.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, Mr. Poppin, I think just a concern is the lack of transparency. If the Vikings were a publicly traded company, your financials would be available for public review and inspection. When Target or any other major Minnesota corporation asks for a subsidy, their records are publicly available. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't have financials, you don't have a balance sheet that you can share or are willing to share or permitted to share perhaps by the NFL, I don't know, to share with the taxpayers of Minnesota to know what kind of entity we are benefiting and what the financial status is now versus in the future. Because it seems to me if we knew better how much you were going to make off this deal, we could better judge and better negotiate how much of this facility should be funded by the taxpayer. Because right now we're kind of negotiating in the dark with you. We don't know how much you're going to be benefited from this, and you're doing a very good job and Mr. Bagley does a very good job of kind of skating around these issues about whether you'll leave or not leave and what the value is and so forth, and making these other comparisons. But I just, from a public taxpayer standpoint, I don't think we have very much information about the kind of position that you are in and the need for this subsidy. It's different from almost any other business that seeks a subsidy, any large business, which tends to be publicly traded. So is there a reason why we can't get more information?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, we understand that that's a concern, and we have we've had our financial statements reviewed at the request of the governor's office as well as at the request of the business community. So that has taken place, and we have had those looked at in a confidential manner.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair and Mr. Poppin, so you can't share those financial statements with the legislature?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, we have, in working with our league, we're a private entity. We have provided the information to outside representatives to ensure that we're not in a position where we are representing something that we're representing that we're losing money, but we're actually making money. That's not the case. We wanted to make sure that what we were stating and the fact that we are not making money was actually the case.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, Mr. Poppin, and I know you haven't done an evaluation, but you must have a balance sheet, I would presume. Is that correct?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, we do.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, Mr. Poppin, I understand. I'm not suggesting that you're misrepresenting the facts or you're not telling the truth, but what you're forcing us to do is to negotiate tax dollars without knowing whether we're negotiating a good deal or not. And there's a lot of urgency for good reasons in a lot of places to get a project going and get something done. I understand that. But we still have to be careful. And unfortunately, the proponents of the project are the ones who have reviewed the financials, and part of the reason why you have public review of records like that is to have a mix of views to understand what's really going on. And I think it's asking a lot to have taxpayers of Minnesota provide a subsidy to benefit your business without really knowing how well you're doing by that subsidy and not really knowing if those taxpayers are getting a good deal. And I mean, the NFL is a private entity and you're a franchise and you can't go outside of your contractual obligations to the NFL. I understand all that. But it is just part of the racket that is the professional sports stadium game.
Thank you. Any other questions for these witnesses? Representative Simon.
Just a quick one, Mr. Bagley, or whoever wants to answer it. You've talked a little bit about the life cycle of the stadium. Do you consider the life cycle to be the 30-year lease, or is there some life beyond that? I guess one of my concerns is, and I'll pick on another franchise for a second, but the Metrodome was built in 1982, and 15 years later, the Twins, who ultimately got their facility, were already saying it was old. I just want to make sure that what we're building is, and I'm mixing my sports here, but that it's more like Fenway Park or more like some other venues or Soldier Field or something, which I know needed renovations, and less like some other facilities that need constant renovation. I mean, I guess my concern is, are we going to be back here in 15 years hearing that it's outdated and we don't have enough concourses and enough luxury boxes and enough this, that, or the other? What is the life cycle of this facility as you see it?
Mr. Poppin?
Madam Chair, Representative, the life cycle cost that we've been speaking about is based on 30 years. I will say this, that as part of the design process, we went through a couple years ago with the Sports Commission and went through an extensive review of different stadiums around the league and did come up with schematic design. Part of the process in doing that, a very, very important point to us, to the Sports Facilities Commission, and it should be to the public, is that we're not in this situation again. So part of that process was ensuring that as we went through the design process, the schematic design process, that we built flexibility in to be able to adjust with the times, and making sure that within that design there's flexibility to move based on different technologies that come in. One of the biggest issues with the Metrodome is the fact that of the footprint. It is just too small of a footprint to make adjustments to that. So we wanted to make sure that the footprint, that the design within the building was flexible, so we're not in this position in the future.
Simon. Anyone else? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Simon actually, with his question, got me to thinking about another potential question, and that is, within the 30-year life cycle that you're talking about for the stadium, would that include the expansions and contractions and flexibility that you're talking about, or would that be built in after the current 30-year life cycle that you're talking about?
Mr. Poppin.
Madam Chair, Representative, it could be either. The goal is to, if there was anything that was needed within the short term, that flexibility is there. There is an agreement in the term sheet that if there are certain revenue producing items that the Vikings want to make a change on prior to the end of the lease, that we would pay 100% of those. So it is we do want to build flexibility within that 30-year period. But the goal of the whole process would be, when we get to the end of that 30 years, that the flexibility is there to, if we need to do some tweaks to it or some expansion or renovation to it, we're not looking at a brand new stadium like we are right now.
Anyone else? Well, I'm sure you'll stick around if we have more questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to Ted Mondale. He's here. Welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, members, there's a number of questions that were brought up that maybe I can address and be glad to answer questions I may.
If you could just put your name on tape.
Ted Mondale, I'm the chair of the Sports Facilities Commission. There were a couple questions on the PSL and naming rights. And we have built a team up with the assistance of the business community. We've had Craig Skeim, who's here with me today, who's the president of CSL, his Minneapolis-based firm has probably been involved in 50% of the stadium deals across the country, sometimes on the private side, sometimes on the public side. Also, a number of the business leaders funded Many of you know Jack Sperling, who's been involved in this, and a guy named Mike Keenan, who is the president and CEO of the Cleveland Browns. We have reviewed the financials of this deal, Representative Winkler, and we do believe that it is a fair deal. And philosophically, that talks about the naming rights and the PSLs. What we're looking at is a facility in a medium, or in the NFL, small-side facility that is a year-round facility. So instead of, our philosophy was, instead of going into the revenue within the stadium, we wanted to be sure that the civic events that would take place 355 days a year versus the 10 days of the Vikings were subsidized by the Vikings. So that our high school sports, our college sports, Hmong New Year, rollerblading, etc., would be open to the public, much like a state park, over those 355 days. So we've looked at this. We believe that is a fair deal. We believe that it is a good deal. And be glad to answer questions on that. Representative Beard, we've had numerous meetings with MnDOT, with the City of Minneapolis traffic engineers, with the Met Council that obviously has a lot of interest in the bus layovers, and obviously with Central Corridor coming on. And we believe that there are not substantial at all transportation costs here that would cost the state. As you know, we went through substantial review on the Arden Hills site, which was the favorite of the team. It was the favorite of the governor. It seemed to cash flow out if the transportation number was right. And we came up with a number that was actually below the initial MnDOT number. But as we went through the process, we had leaders from the Democratic side on both caucuses and the Republican side, and the Republicans said, we cannot pass a bill that would preempt a referendum on a local option sales tax. So with that position, it was felt that the Ramsey County $350 million that they would raise from the local option sales tax was no longer viable. So that's why we went to Minneapolis. But this has been reviewed by MnDOT, it's been reviewed by the Met Council, it's been reviewed by the Minneapolis traffic engineers as well. And quite frankly, you have a $1 billion light rail line coming in here. This year they had a game. We had a game this year with the Green Bay Packers, where we got 65,000 people in there and out of there very quickly. Downtown Minneapolis does 75,000 people every morning and every night, and this facility will be able to handle the traffic flow very well, and especially with the addition of the North Star Corridor, it will do so very well. So I think we have a proposal that we believe to be fair, given our market circumstances, fair, given the fact that it's a multi-purpose facility, fair in that the Vikings will be subsidizing our youth athletes, and other civic events for 355 days around the year, one that has minimal risk in the construction of the facility, and one that will allow this team to stay here for another generation. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Scelzi.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I'm to understand that all of those events that take place 350 how many days a year, take place at the current Metrodome. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Mondale.
Madam Chair.
Representative Scelzi.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And I'm just kind of curious, being a Ramsey County representative, why was the required local partnership from Ramsey County $350 million, and I'm to understand that the City of Minneapolis partnership is $150 million, and am I wrong in that, and why would there be a difference?
Mr. Mondale.
Madam Chair, Representative, the initial contribution from the proposed contribution that the Vikings negotiated with the County of Ramsey was $350 million. The total, and after the local option, the waiver of the local option sales tax went away, we had a $350 million hole in the budget. The total amount of spending, if you take the capital and the life cycle cost of for the City of Minneapolis is 340? It's $340 million. The city is in for $7.5 million for operating, inflating, and the city is in for $150 million in capital costs, and the capital costs obviously don't inflate. So it's 340 for the city of Minneapolis. And of course, earlier on, the city was open to raising their own taxes. In fact, if we could take the waiver off and go back to that proposal, excuse me, Councilmember President, we could be pretty close to a local share picking up a great amount of this. But it's a similar amount of money in total that the County of Ramsey put in place, but the difference is there are no new taxes. These are existing taxes. They are in place. They will just be repurposed for this particular construction project and operation.
Representative Scalzi.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So, you're saying that it was exactly the same amount of money from the local partner, except that this has an existing tax that Ramsey County was not able to start because it was a new tax. It would have been a comparable tax.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mandel.
Representative, on the life cycle of the building, when the building costs about $21 million a year to run, that's a big number. Because if you think about net present value, you multiply by 25, so that's a big number. The overall net present value of the contribution of what Ramsey County put forward, if they could get a waiver of their 0.5% sales tax versus what Minneapolis is offering with not increasing any taxes, is about a $10 million difference over the 30-year span.
Representative Scalzi.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So then we're assuming that the reauthorization of the sales tax will be an automatic by the state, and that's not considered new taxes when this current sales tax expires?
Madam Chair, Representative,
Mondale.
this current sales tax does not expire under existing law. So it is just repurposed for, there are 4 different taxes, and the major amount of money right now is going to the convention center, and we can, the city, president of the city council is here and staff as well can answer that. But after those bonds go off, a good amount of those dollars would be put into this stadium. So they would be repurposed, but there is no, the local option sales tax, many of them will put on for the Metrodome, are in place, and there's no legislative blink off at any time.
Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And under the purview of the committee, our work here, there's just a couple questions. One is, Mr. Mondale, the Minnesota Sports Facilities Commission, we're used to dealing with them for the last 30 years or so. Why are they going away? Why couldn't they fit the bill? Why do we need now the Minnesota Stadium Authority? Can you help us understand that?
Mr. Mondale.
Madam Chair, Representative, all of these stadium bills have, rightly or wrongly, reconstituted the commission that oversees them based on the general amount of revenue that each entity has put in. As you know, the Metrodome was originally a region-wide sales tax, and once the Met Center property was sold and many of the bonds paid off and Minneapolis was chosen, all of the taxes that went to pay for the Metrodome at that time were derived out of the city of Minneapolis. So the legislature said, let's, basically, there's 7 members, 6 are picked by the city, and 1 is picked by the governor. The idea here is that the state is putting in $398 million, so they would get 3 seats, and the city is putting in $340 million, so they would get 2 seats on this commission. So that is the thinking behind that.
Thank you.
Representative Beard.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanation. That's helpful. First of all, I just want to applaud you for reminding us that this is actually the People's Stadium, belongs to the state of Minnesota, not the Vikings, that you're going to continue that tradition. That's helpful as we think about why we should vote for this bill. A new question, Madam Chair, Mr. Mondale. On page 11 of the bill, 11.25, there's exemption for Met Council review. You can speak a little bit about that with the business subsidy requirement and so on and so forth, but the one that really intrigues me is one that in another committee we're having some issues with, and that is the rapidly escalating costs of SAC and WAC charges to developers and businesses in this state, in the metro area. Excuse me, it's just a metro area issue. I noticed that these are going to be waived, and I have a hunch this could be a pretty substantial number. Can you talk about how that you arrived at that, and what in the world did you have to do to the Met Council to get them to waive that? Because I'd like to know, because I have a couple of businesses in Scott County, I'd like to talk to them about waiving some charges.
Well, Madam Chair, as part of this bill, I studied the Met Council extensively. And in fact, when we were looking at the Arden Hill site and we were looking at the site down by the Basilica, or like we call Linden Yards, where there hadn't been a large SAC contribution to the particular piece of property, the number was pretty high, $1 million, $1.9 million maybe on either one of those. And so we thought that that would be a good way for the Met Council to help contribute to this nice project. Frankly, here we have a facility that has, 65,000 people per game that has paid its fees, so we don't think that waiver would be all that high. I don't know what the number is, but it's certainly not as high as what it would be on a new facility that hasn't paid those existing fees. So I don't think, I understand there's I might have read some of the amendments coming forward, and if there was an issue with that, then I don't think it would cause damage at all to the financing mechanism that we have here.
Senator Beard?
Thank you. So we're thinking possibly that the SAC and WAC charges that have already been credited to the Metrodome could probably transfer to the new site then?
Mr. Mondale?
Madam Chair, Representative, yes. The way the SAC waiver works is it stays with the site.
Okay.
So if you were to, I think that going to Scott County, if this site were not to be rebuilt and you put a housing on there, I think you could argue that that site itself has way overpaid what the SAC charges would be, and the existing law would to, after 5 years, those SAC fees that were paid would go back into the system. So here, because they've already paid for this particular site, which is pretty similar. Now, the Metrodome is 900,000 square feet. This is 1.5 million square feet, so it's a much bigger facility. But frankly, I don't believe that the SAC charges would be significant on this particular site because they've been paid already.
Madam Chair, just one last comment. Thank you for answering the questions. Appreciate we'll probably have some more discussion if that amendment comes forward. Unrelated to this committee, but if you'll indulge me, Madam Chair, is one of my favorite topics, or not so much. On page 6, 29, the purpose. Mr. Mondale, many of us and members, we're intrigued by the concept. We're interested in making sure that the Vikings stay, if they can do so in a prudent, reasonable fashion. We're fascinated with the idea of the Publix building, where we have college ball games and lacrosse and soccer and the winter golf tournament and, of course, the boat show. We can't forget the boat show. We couldn't make it through winter without that. But it seems to me that the purpose on line 6.3 says the purpose of the chapter is to provide for the construction, financing, so on and so forth, period. That's enough for most of us. Mr. Mondale and members, just when we start doing findings and declarations that it serves a public purpose, we love the Vikings, they're highly valued, and so on and so forth, you start to really impose on some of us to hold our head high and vote for all those other lofty things. This is great for a press conference, I suppose, and I'm looking at my friend Representative Hornstein because this is one of my findings speeches. As the bill moves to the next committee, I hope you don't mind if you lose the findings. You can keep your purpose. That makes it pretty clear what the legislature is up to build a public stadium. But the reasons that you might have may not be the same reasons why some people around this table might want to vote for it. More importantly, if and when it gets to the floor, why we may vote for it. So I'll just make that comment. You don't even have to respond. I just want you to know some of us think about these things. Some of us note them and comment on them regularly.
Madam Chair, Representative, very briefly, the reason the public purpose language is in here is the legislature directing the court that should the Vikings want to leave, and we find that they leave and they break the lease, that the court will be able to apply specific performance that in the court ruling they would have to stay here rather than pay a damage and go somewhere else. So the reason this language is broad and maybe seems broader than we like to put in our statutes is to direct the court that should the Vikings, the current owners, future owners, whatever it may be, and you look back to where the Twins were a number of years ago in that lawsuit, that the public could go to court and get the result that they would be forced to continue to play here to fill out their contract. And that's why that language is broad and in there, and it was specifically put in there by our lawyers. And Representative Beard, Madam Chair, this is rather common language now in almost every stadium bill across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. That's very helpful. It's lawyer talk, and I want you to know I heard that comment. Thank you.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad Representative Beard had brought up that SAC fee. It's on It's on page 11, lines 30 to 32. And I have a letter from Metro Cities, which is an umbrella group for metropolitan municipalities, and they're very concerned that we don't have that specific number. I know Mr. Mondale said it wasn't high, but we still don't have a specific number. And their concern is that, number one, this is unprecedented in the history of the SAC program to have this kind of a waiver. The Twins never asked for it. And their worry is that, this will be spread across other cities. And we know how cash-strapped cities are right now, and so this would be one more expense. So it would be very helpful to get the figure because, I think it's a really significant issue in this bill, and it's without precedent, and I'm glad, Representative Beard, you raised that, and it is a really major concern of mine.
Well, Madam Chair, Representative, if you recall when you were on the Met Council, we used to waive SAC fees for affordable housing, and it was quite a successful program, and then it was finished after our time. But, Madam Chair, Representative, I don't think it's a big number. I don't think it upsets the pool, because it's basically got a user pool. And I don't think it's big enough to have a major impact at all in the financing plan that we put forward. And I understand that the Metro Cities are concerned about this, and I would say that, if an amendment is passed that makes this deal undoable, it's kind of like voting no for something without voting no. I don't think that taking that language out of there would cause major harm, and I presume we'll see an amendment to that tonight.
Thank you.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mondale, a couple questions for you. Let's assume for the sake of the argument of this question that the Vikings are out of the picture. They're no longer a tenant at the Metrodome, and they've moved to a different community, or they've built their own facility at their private dollars. What happens to the Metrodome over the next 30 years? Have you done any kind of an analysis as to costs, repairs, maintenance, upkeep? And the reason I ask that question is sometimes you're out looking at cars and you say, although the car that I have right now does fine, maybe I'm better off trading that in for some longer-term value. Have you done an analysis on that at all to see if there's, in fact, more value for the taxpayer dollar to build something today as to continue to put money into a facility that's currently in existence?
Mr. Mondale?
Madam Chair, Representative, the Vikings events pay for about 85% of the current Metrodome operations. We believe under the current quasi-rent structure that we have today that we can probably keep it going through 2014, maybe 2015, but I think within a year of the Vikings leaving, we would either have to shut the facility down or come and ask for $5-6 million a year for you to keep it up. So my sense is that the facility certainly is not viable more than a half a year, maybe a year after a potential Vikings leaving. It's like having a mall without tenants.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mondale, you cited the figures of $5 to $6 million. Would that be subsidizing operations and or capital improvements?
Mr. Mondale?
Madam Chair, yes. Things break in there. It is an old facility. We had to put some money in here this year for some new scoreboards because there aren't parts for the old scoreboards that we have. The elevator broke. It was hard to find parts for that elevator. We were very glad that we were able to put the roof back up again. But this is a 30-some-year-old facility. Quite frankly, the problem with the facility, and we looked at a rebuild of the facility, and the difference between building new and rebuilding was about $40 million. So if you'd really want to spend $40 million, $50 million left, and then take the old boilers and put them back in, it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. The facility's just too small. There are not enough bathrooms. There's not enough room for people to leave. You have to choose which quarter that you miss to go to the bathroom. I know female fans are not really happy with the situation there. It just does not work for a modern facility that would allow the team to compete financially with the teams that competes on the field, and that is the goal here. This is a team, and Representative Winkler, you brought this up earlier. We have looked at their past historic financial records. This is a team that's not making money. They have lost and will lose with the new agreement, $15 to $20 million a year in revenue sharing going forward. Now they've got a good collective bargaining agreement, and they have a good new television agreement. But we believe very strongly that their return on investment is going to be, somewhere maybe above, Representative Beard, a sewer bond, but not something you would invest in as a rational economic money-making venture. So we believe that this structure that we have here today will allow them to compete, to put a team on the field to be competitive, but will not allow them to enrich themselves through this deal by having a football team here.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mondale, could you just summarize again for us some of the other events that go on in the Metrodome that if it's shut down would no longer have that venue, and what might happen to, and again, I realize I'm asking you to speculate, where might those events go if they're held at all?
Mr. Mondale.
Madam Chair, Representative, the University of Minnesota plays a 46-game baseball schedule in there. Every MIAC, every Division I, II, III baseball team in the state plays a number of games there. I know my son plays for McAllister, and they have teams coming from Iowa and Wisconsin and Illinois that play there. Their families come. Quite frankly, there's more fans for those doubleheaders that start at midnight from the visiting teams than the home teams. If your kid's not pitching, you probably don't go to the doubleheader starting at midnight. There is soccer. There's rollerblades. I mean, literally, this facility is used 325 events a year. Now, the problem with the facility now is we are losing events. As Mr. Bagley said, we'll never get another Final Four in that facility. We'll never get a Super Bowl. We'll never get a Big Ten championship. We'll never get these type of events that will bring significant revenue and, quite frankly, branding to our Twin Cities metropolitan area because the facility is just way too old. So there are, I think, over 200 high schools have played there, especially in rainy years. Not so bad this year, but like last year, high schools come in there, and during certainly for the baseball season, you're talking about a facility that's running 18 hours a day. Not a lot of fans, but a lot of kids play there, there's all sorts of events that go on there, and quite frankly, the way this is structured is the Vikings themselves will greatly subsidize and allow us to be able to offer these events at a cost that our high schools and our civic organizations can actually afford to use this facility in. And in a location such as ours, which it is cold and it is wet, a fixed climate, large, multi-use purpose stadium is very important to our youth sports and our civic activities in the state. And this agreement would allow them to play at almost the existing costs that they do today. I know when, my kid played at Benilde and it was a wet year, we were getting games at $400 a game, which is very affordable for high school operation. Were that not for that subsidy, I don't know what it would cost, but it would probably be out of the reach of most of our youth sports organizations.
Thank you. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mondale, during the 2 years of non-football season construction activity, where are all of these events going?
Mr. Mondale.
Madam Chair, Representative, we believe the way it's currently configured is that at a maximum we would have 1 year for the Vikings outside, not playing at the Dome. So the idea is to push the stadium back. So, the parking lot in the back of the stadium by 11th Avenue, we push the stadium back, build 2/3 of it, don't hold me to the number, and just like St. Louis the last day when St. Louis Baseball Stadium ended, there was a whole construction crew outside waiting to, blow the stadium up. So we think there would be 1 year, similar to last year, where all these civic events would play somewhere else. I know our kids played in some big, the McAllister team played in some big converted tennis dome in Milwaukee. The University of Minnesota went to Arizona. All these entities will go someplace else or not hold them at all. So, but given the way this is engineered out today, we believe that it would only be 1 year that the state would be out of those facilities for those 355 extra days.
Senator Plum.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mondale, I agree with everything you said about the site being too small, the Metrodome facilities not being adequate. I believed that before they were built. Can you convince me that the site that was too small, now with a little bit of playing around at the edges, is now going to be a viable long-term site?
That seems like a really potentially long answer. Maybe you could kind of wrap it up in a short answer.
Madam Chair, Representative, we believe that the facility is big enough to meet. I can't imagine it needs to be bigger. It will be built and designed to last a long time. It will be built and designed to be flexible. My guess would be is there are technologies that we can't even think about today that may be added to the facility in the future. So we don't think there will be the size constraints. We think you'd be able to refit it rather than rebuild it in the future, but sometimes 30, 40 years out, there are things that happen that we can't foresee today. But this will be a world-class facility. It will be designed for all of our different sporting events, baseball, Final Fours, all those type of things. But to say what will happen in 30 to 40 years, I would direct members that there is a provision for the Vikings to renew up to 20 years in the particular facility. So this facility may hold them for 50 years. But yes, and again, the square footage is 900,000 for the existing facility, and this is 1.5 million square feet. So this is a very large building. There'll be lots of room for the rollerbladers.
Senator Plum.
One last question in lines with Representative Beard's question, or line of questioning. If you're adding all this additional seating, you're expecting more people to come, and I think in the, quite a few more people. You're going to have a couple thousand on-site parking locations. I've been to a few games and noticed the traffic with this percentage larger amount of attendance. How is the traffic going to be any better, or if not worse, by that percent or more?
Mr. Mondale.
Madam Chair, the facility is built for 65,000 seats for a regular football game, expanded to 72,000 to accommodate a Super Bowl. So that is similar to the Metrodome today. The difference will be that the concourses where it's widest today would be the narrowest in this facility. There'll be more bathrooms. The seats will be almost twice as big. The viewing will be better so that you can see the field. So there really won't, the difference will be not so much the number of people coming into a particular game. The fact is it will be used for many more games, and it will generate more revenue, so the team will not be in a cash flow negative or break-even position. The Vikings ownership will have, after this investment, $1.2 million into this franchise. To think a private sector entity would put $1.2 billion into an entity that would break even, and therefore they can afford it themselves and move forward, is not something that works in real life. And while the Vikings ownership has been very good about not threatening to leave, and I don't believe they want to leave, fact of the matter is, if you put $1 billion or $800 million into an investment, you've got to be able to make some money. And to think that they're going to stay here forever making no money is not something that is viable. Maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 7 years. But sooner or later, if we don't act on this, they will leave. And we will be a major league city that will look like a B-class city. We will miss this revenue, the $18 to $20 million a year. It will be a hole in our budget. The state in this deal brings in $450 million more dollars than it puts in over the 30-year life cycle of this funding. The state does very, very well on this funding deal. I would say to you that many other sports wouldn't have the kind of revenue coming back to the state. But the fact of the matter, this is an extremely successful enterprise, the NFL. They have 56 players on both teams, highly paid staff and executives, and they pay their income taxes here. And so we're talking about a significant profit to the state over this 30-year period of time, $450 million in net cash, about $140 million if you cash it out as a net present value. So we're putting $398 in, we're getting a $140 million profit. I don't know if you can say that for other sports because of the amount of revenue that comes out, but this is a good deal for the state of Minnesota if you look at it over a 30-year period of time.
Okay, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this whole conversation about all the different events that could take place in the Metrodome, in the new facility that currently take place in the Metrodome. At one time, I recall that the Vikings ownership was pretty insistent on having an outdoor facility. Now, something had changed, and I know that 2 of the 4 NFC North teams do fine outdoors, and you've got New England and Pittsburgh and Cleveland new facilities outdoors. I know you will lose some of these events, but 3/4 of the year we can still do these events in an outdoor facility. How much money, in your estimation, would we save by not having this roof or this level of extravagance, I think, that is proposed for this facility? I think it's fairly significant, certainly north of $100 million.
Mr. Mondale?
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, you're probably looking at, and don't hold me to this, but this is, I think, a fair $200 million, $250 million difference, and then probably operations of $5 to $7 million a year is the difference for having a full-time multi-use facility. I think when we had the hearings last year, and I forget which of the House hearings, a number of the members said, this is kind of like a state park. You got the Vikings here, and they're going to subsidize the rest of our using. So if you said all we want is to put money into a facility that would get us 10 games a year, and maybe other events, maybe U2, whatever it is, but you're not going to get Big Ten baseball. You're not going to get all these other events that are there. It would be a significantly different cost structure, and it would be a significantly different operations cost structure. My boss has said he wanted a People's Stadium, and that what motivates him. And what motivates him is not the football team aspect of it. What motivates him is the fact that we would have this civic asset for our kids or different organizations across the street, across the state. And I think that's why he's been so actively involved in supporting this and has been insistent that whatever we push through, if there's going to be significant state funding, would allow for that civic youth sports benefit, which this package does.
Representative Hornstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. But it seems that, one could use this facility from perhaps April through November for soccer and baseball and other kinds of events, concerts, and save a couple $100 million. So it just seems that we're looking at sort of a Cadillac model, and maybe we could do as well as some of these other communities and save the taxpayers some money. But clearly something had changed along the way, I think, with the Vikings and Sports Authority. But it seems like that would be an option, and I wish that would that were on the table still.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I think that having a year-round covered stadium is extremely important. I appreciate what you're saying, Representative Hornstein, but the uses by our colleges, by our high schools, at various times of the year, I think is very important. I've gone to some of those doubleheaders starting at midnight, watching MIAC schools play. And my son did pitch one of the games. But my question, and you touched on it Mr. Mondale just a little bit about raising the competitive level of the team. And maybe you can answer this, maybe Mr. Bagley wants to chip in as well. But, I think when you distill everything for the fans of Minnesota football, in the end, that's what they want. A team that's competitive, a team that could win a championship. And just wondered how you think the stadium, the new stadium, could make the team more competitive. I asked that question, but let me preface a little bit more by saying that some years back I asked an official of the Minnesota Twins, I said, we were considering the question of a new Twin stadium, and I was wondering if that could help us get a new power hitter. And he said, no, but I guarantee you it'll make the team more competitive. Well, it's not been too good the last couple of years here. So could you answer that question for me, how you think this would make the Vikings more competitive?
Mr. Mondale, but I also just want to point out that we do have at least a dozen people that are going to testify and probably a dozen amendments, so if you could just keep your answers short, that'd be helpful.
Madam Chair, Representative, I believe this proposal would allow the Vikings organization to be competitive financially with the teams they compete with on the field. How that funny ball bounces and who gets injured and what happens, we can't say. But we know today that what we have, they will not be able to in the future unless they decide to make this their own personal charity, which I'm sensing is not going to be the case. So this would allow the team to be competitive for the next 30, 50 years, so we can hope to go to a Super Bowl where the Vikings are playing. But that will not happen under the existing circumstances.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now it's looking like we're moving on to the part of the testifying that is individuals and maybe some businesses that want to testify. So since this is the part of the bill where we're not actually presenting the bill, we're going to impose a time limit because we do have so many folks that want to testify. So try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Ms. Hansen will show you how much time you have, and this will help us be more efficient since we've been here almost 2 hours now. We'll start with John Griffith from Target and then Elliot Jaffe from U.S. Bank. If you could just pay attention to Ms. Hansen as you go. And when you start your testimony, please just remember to identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, my name is John Griffith. I'm the Executive Vice President of Property Development for Target Corporation, our state's largest private employer. We are proud to employ more than 10,000 people in downtown Minneapolis and more than 25,000 people across the state of Minnesota. The vitality of our largest city's urban core is an issue of importance that extends beyond the 7-county metro area. Simply put, when Minneapolis succeeds, the entire state reaps the benefits. From Albert Lea to International Falls, from Moorhead to Winona, we all do better when Minneapolis is strong, vibrant, and growing. We know this because we are all across the state. That's why I'm happy to be here to speak in support of the plans for a new Viking Stadium in downtown Minneapolis. This proposal, which over the long run will result in more than half the cost being paid by the Vikings, is about more than just keeping the NFL in Minnesota. It's about keeping Minnesota and our entire state competitive. The stadium will generate significant economic benefits through Vikings games, events, concerts, conventions, Super Bowls, NCAA tournaments, as has been said. It will also be a major selling point as we look to bring new employers to our state and as our existing job creators like Target work to attract and retain the very best talent. Over the last 12 months, Target has added more than 400 jobs to downtown Minneapolis. These are strong, well-paying headquarter jobs, and we are attracting people from the strongest colleges and universities locally as well as all across America. They come to Minneapolis to be a part of a first-class city. The stadium is part of a long-term plans to revitalize downtown, making Minnesota a great place to visit, live, work, and do business for generations to come. Minneapolis isn't the only community that sees this utility in the type of this thinking. Across the country, new stadiums have created jobs, construction, hospitality industries, revitalized communities, and generated long-term growth. Places like Seattle, Denver, Baltimore have used sports and entertainment districts as part of broader efforts to bolster their competitive position. In recent decades, the legislature, the city of Minneapolis, and the people of Minnesota have stepped forward to support smart investments that pay big dividends to the community. This plan is in keeping with that proud tradition, which is why I'm grateful to be here to ask for the opportunity to have your support on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I'm Elliot Jaffe, Twin Cities Market President for U.S. Bank. I also serve as the board chair for the Minneapolis Downtown Council, and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here to state that the business community in Minnesota widely supports this project and the bill that we're reviewing this evening. And we do this for a number of reasons. It is important to keep the Vikings in the state. It is important that we remain very competitive. We're in a fiercely competitive business environment, not just with other countries, but with our neighbors around us, and we need to think about these things strategically. The Vikings are clearly part of our culture. They're part of our brand, as it was mentioned earlier. One of the great markers of Minnesota is that we have all 4 primary professional sports. In my professional responsibilities, I'm actively involved in recruiting talent. I work with numerous businesses, large and small, and they speak about the quality of life that we have in our state, and this is a critical element of that. And there are, of course, the very narrow but clear economic benefits that the Vikings and the facility bring in terms of jobs, in terms of hospitality activities. The project itself will have enormous economic investment. It will be used for many, many purposes over 30 years. Our view is that this is a terrific investment for the state, for all the participants that are in this. They're doing so in a manner where they invest proportional to their benefits, and we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Representative Morrison. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, we have one more.
Well, I'm joining my colleagues. My name is Charlie Zelli. I'm president and CEO of Jefferson Lines, and I'm coming here as chair of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce and a Minneapolis resident. Thank you, Representative Hornstein. And I'm just coming in to join my colleagues in supporting the stadium. The Minneapolis Chamber and all the Metropolitan Chambers of the western area have taken a strong stance of support because of the businesses, large and small, that are going to be affected by this facility. I'll just say briefly, just to join in, Jefferson Lines operates in 13 states, and I'm very familiar with the hospitality impacts. There's many groups and individuals that actually do come from the surrounding areas into downtown because of this facility. And it's not just the Vikings, but it's all the year-round activities coming from throughout the state of Minnesota, as well as places like Sioux Falls, Hudson, Fargo, you name it. Anyway, I'm here to join this group. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Representative Hornstein. Thank you. And Mr. Zelli and I always say this when you're here. Thank you for all of your advocacy for public transit and transportation. There's actually the Downtown Council as a whole. It's been great. But we're not talking about that today. There's a mechanism in the bill on page 15, lines 14 to 16, and I had referenced this earlier, which, sets up this idea of organizations and individuals making a tax-deductible donation, towards, they're commemorative bricks, but I imagine that it goes to the stadium authority or to some entity to help finance this facility. Have you given any thought to a very broad-based effort to engage the business community, either in this mechanism that's set up in the bill or something else, setting up some kind of a foundation or entity that would receive contributions from individuals, from CEOs, from businesses themselves to help finance this facility? I ask because, we had the big deficit last year. We're very likely going to have a big state deficit next year. We have a huge public state commitment to this facility in this bill. I'd like to see, as I've stated before, the amount of private money, and that could be Vikings money, it could be a loan, it could be support from your businesses significantly increased and the public commitment decreased. Has there been any thought to doing some kind of a massive effort like this to raise money from the private sector to support this, both the construction, particularly the construction, if not some of the capital costs of this facility?
To any of the testifiers?
John Griffith. Madam Chair, member. Our perspective at Target is that the people that benefit the most from the stadium should pay the most. The Vikings benefit the most, they should pay the most, and they are. And our contribution from Target Corporation will come in the forms of utilizing that, the gravity that kind of first-class city has to grow a business. We want to add another 400 jobs next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after. And when those jobs come, they buy houses, they pay property taxes, they pay income taxes. And with that growth, because of these kinds of investments that you make, that's our partnership in the equation. We'll come alongside for the suites and the advertising and all of those kinds of things, and it will be a good, solid approach to business. But our best day is making sure that we're a great company doing the right thing, building and growing a business.
Madam Chair, Representative, I'll just add, first, thinking broadly about how U.S. Bank supports the community, we contribute more than $20 million a year to all kinds of organizations, and I know my colleagues at their companies do the same, much of that directed right here in Minnesota. And the way we partner with organizations varies, and we do so with the Vikings really in the way we support them through sponsorships, through our commitment to suites, our commitment to season tickets. We would anticipate that kind of support would continue, and that's really how the economic model of this project would work.
That's Representative Ornstein, and as you know, I've been involved in public-private partnerships, involved with charitable donations. It is my view that the dollars that we've just described from Target, U.S. Bank, and even smaller companies like Jefferson Lines would still be there, but it doesn't come in the form, and it really isn't a model that really applies to this economic entity. Although, when you look at the jobs, the activity that comes out of it, it really continues to be kind of that civic investment in various forms.
Thank you.
Representative Hornstein. Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is to the representative from U.S. Bank or Target. The funding sources for this, in addition to the team, are the Minneapolis hospitality tax, essentially, and statewide gambling. And I wonder if this is a good deal, whether you would support, if this moves forward, any amendments to the bill to include a temporary corporate income surcharge tax of some kind to help fund the bill, or if this is only a good deal if other people pay for it.
Who'd like that one? Mr. Griffith? Mr. Jaffe?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Representative, my view of that is that we're supportive of the proposal that has come together now. It has all kinds of trade-offs built into it. It's a good investment, in our view, for the state, for the city, and for all the constituencies that are involved here. We think that the economic model that's been established is truly the right one.
We would echo, Madam Chair, Representative, similar thoughts. Target Corporation is the most philanthropic corporation in America, has been voted that many times over the last decade. And we believe in a strong, growing, vibrant city. The business equation put together for this works. It's been tested and tried for, I think, the last 10 years, right? Pushed back and forth. It's been compared. It's been benchmarked against other cities, against other teams, against larger markets, smaller markets across the board. And what you have, I think, is a very, very fair transaction.
Representative Winkler.
Well, Madam Chair, I didn't really expect to get a direct and straight answer to the question, but just to point out that in addition to not knowing how well the Vikings are going to do from this transaction, we have the business community stepping up in support of it without having to pay for it. And I think that's, believe me, my constituents are more than happy to take benefits without having to pay for them too, but that doesn't make this bill particularly unique or unusual at the state legislature. If it's a good deal, it just seems to me that business community should want to pay for it directly rather than have ordinary citizens pay for it.
Any other questions? Thank you. We'll move on to the next witness then, Larry Spooner. And then after him will be Bob Carney. Welcome to the committee, and if you could just identify yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Larry Spooner from Plymouth, and needless to say, I think we should pass this on and try to get this thing rolling here. The Vikings have been over here for 10 years. I've been over here for 14. I recognize a lot of you guys. I'm sure you're sick of seeing me. I don't know what else I can say. If Red McCombs owned this team right now, I think we'd all be watching the Twins play the Yankees on ESPN tonight. I don't think we would be here. Thank God we got Ziggy that's been as patient as everyone in this room. There was a representative that brought up the team being competitive. I want to talk about referendum just for a second here. I'm going to go quick here. I'm scared to death of a referendum as a fan because I don't think it would work for one reason. Let's say the referendum is next November and we're 1-4. Does it pass? No. The bottom line is, you people sitting here, you guys are so much more educated than the general public on these complicated issues involving $1 billion. That's a fact. If you think about a referendum, how easy it would be for the people that don't want this. The last time we had a very important decision by the state of Minnesota's people, there was a G.I. Joe figurine in a commercial, and we had a wrestler as a governor. That's how simple it was. So I'm scared to death of this going to a referendum. You guys are well-read on what's going on. This is way beyond the average citizen's educational, financial aspect. We talk about what is the value, what is the value, what is the value. For me personally, this is the value of the Vikings. I was born in 1960. My parents got divorced in 1965. I went 5 years without seeing my real dad. And the thing that brought me and my dad back together was Viking football. And in an ironic twist, 10 years ago, my dad passed away in the hospital. And just in an ironic twist that only happened to a Viking fan, the last night that he was alive, Bud Grant's wife was his caretaker in just an ironic twist. And Bud dropped off a poster thanking my dad for all his support over all the years. So, when I hear about, what's the value of the Vikings up here, is it worth $1 billion? Is it worth $19? For a lot of us in this state, the Vikings, the Twins, and all these pro teams, it's something that we follow. I never go to the Twins game, but you know what? They're sure a heck of a lot funner to watch on TV right now from Target Field than the Metrodome. I mean, Minnesota, it's more than just paying the bills. We have a great state to live in, and I'm just begging you guys to just pass this bill on to more people to review it. Let's get this thing done. I'm not going away, gang. I'm going to be here every single year until... I'm not thinking Ziggy is going to move the team. I'm scared he will sell the team. And that new owner is going to have an agreement. Let's face it. He ain't going to go through this. So please get this done. Sorry for the extended time.
Thank you. Bob Carney, and as you're walking up, I just wanted to remind all the testifiers that we are going to look at Article 1, 3, 4, 6, and 7 to be approved. Can you please go up and start testifying? Thank you.
Hi, Bob Carney, Minneapolis. Madam Chair, I tore off the bottom on this piece. I'm just wondering if it can be passed out with that torn off. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, please proceed. And if anyone has handouts, please pass them on to the pages.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm strongly in favor of seeing the stadium go through, and I want to introduce this piece that I'm passing out. It has an article showing how we can tie the new Vikings, and I call it the Vikings Timeshare Stadium, how we can tie this in with a transit system that includes what I call purple people movers. These are the same thing that you see in airports. They're elevated, and you can have people stand on them at 10 miles an hour. If you walk, you're going 13 miles an hour. We need to think of the other uses. And we've heard about this to some extent, but this really is a timeshare facility. The Vikings are a tenant, and they're our anchor tenant. Now, if we had an anchor tenant, if you owned a timeshare and you have an anchor tenant, they use it 10 days out of the year and they pay about half of the cost, you would be delighted. And that's really the circumstance that we have here. So we need to think about how to use this stadium the other days to promote convention business and to promote more business. That's something that I strongly urge you to think about. I've got an illustration here, too, I wanted to draw your attention to. There's a 9-square block area that is west of where the new stadium is going to be. And 2/3 of that square footage is parking right now. So one of the things that I urged consideration of is to do a study and see what could be done with that, including using either AstroTurf or pavers and having tailgating again. And that can be done during events for the Vikings, the Twins, and the new soccer team. And that area can be used for other purposes. I also want to point out that we have a huge energy boom going out in the western states. And we need to think about how to build closer business relationships with the people and businesses in those states, and having a Vikings stadium and a Vikings team here is a crucial part of that. One other thing I think we should take a look at is how to have developing the Flying Cloud Airport in the downtown St. Paul Airport as both commercial and regional airports. Transit includes air transit, and we need to build up as many links as we can with these energy states where our energy future in this country is going to be. I want to mention one other thing in terms of this term Vikings Timeshare Stadium. I have enough confidence in this so that I've bought the domain names, VikingsTimeshareStadium.com and .org, and I will donate them for reimbursement of my purchase costs, $10. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Kearney? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Hope you'll
much.
take a look at these amendments. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to the opponents list I have. Tom Goldstein, followed by David Sweet.
Madam Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Tom Goldstein. I'm a resident of St. Paul, private citizen, not on anyone's payroll. I wanted to thank Representative Winkler and Representative Simon, Representative Hornstein, and Representative Scalzi for your earlier questions. This is just the start of the kind of dialogue that we should be having about this stadium. Representative Winkler, I think you've demonstrated that the business community, which I think is left now, is not willing to put any upfront money into the construction of the stadium. They would rather put it into suites and rentals because that is deductible, and we end up subsidizing them that way through our federal taxes. Representative Simon, you talked about the lease and the life cycle of the stadium. The stadium's not going to fall down after 30 years. Fenway Park is 100 years old. Wrigley Field is 100 years old. I think Soldier Field was built in 26. So why are we talking about a 30-year lease? At a very minimum, we should have a 50-year lease on this building. It's not going to fall down, and I would add, it is double the size of the Metrodome. Representative Quam, you asked about, some questions about the size of it and traffic and all of that. The Metrodome has 63,000 seats. This stadium is double the size, but it's only 2,000 more seats, expandable to 72,000. What is in that stadium that requires it to be almost double the size? We have this written into the bill, all these things, 65,000 seats, et cetera, et cetera. The seats, I think that Chair Mondale was a little bit exaggerating when he said the seats are going to be double the size. That's not why the stadium is so big. It's because of all the things the Vikings want in there that are revenue generators for them. And I would not be as charitable as Representative Winkler in terms of the Vikings' characterizations of the stadium. I think they're being quite disingenuous. This is a vehicle for them. The Metrodome would service almost all the other events except the Vikings. It is outdated for the Vikings, but the solution to build an airport-sized hangar stadium, because that's what it is. It's a football field tall. It's 1.5 million square feet. It's an enormous structure, and that's why it costs so much. When
Mr. Bagley said, well, when New England was built, that was 10 years ago and the costs have gone up. No, that's not correct. The New England was an outdoor stadium. This is something very different. It is huge, and we need to get at why the state needs to undertake this kind of expense. And Representative Scalzi, you asked about naming rights. Naming rights the Vikings have made for themselves, and yet the people will own it. That's part of their revenue stream to pay for this. And I think you need to nail down what the Vikings are actually putting in, because that is also inaccurate. And since I'm being told here that I have to end, there was a question about the value of the team. As the Vikings representatives well know, Forbes magazine has valued them at $796 million. Most teams with new stadiums will be worth $1 billion. They cited the Jacksonville Jaguars and the St. Louis Rams as having been recently sold.
Thank you.
I'm not sure the cost, but I think that it's fairly close to the valuation of Forbes, so I think you can take that as an accurate valuation.
Thank you. Mr. Sweet?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I guess there's a question for
Madam Chair, I have a
Mr.
quick
Hornstein.
question for Mr.
Representative
Hornstein. You
Hornstein.
mentioned towards the end of your testimony that you said that you're not sure that the actual contribution is $427 million, that the Vikings as a team may be putting in less, but you didn't really get into any specifics. So I just very quickly wanted to find out in your mind from when you testified to this, but I wanted to get some specifics. If it's not 427, what are the Vikings as a team putting in? Because I guess they're including the NFL loan and some other things. What's the figure?
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, NPR in their own analysis said the Vikings might put in $30 million, they might put in nothing. The Vikings are supposed to get a $200 million loan from the NFL that is to be paid back from revenue generated by the luxury suites, revenue that would not be available to them if not for the building of the stadium. We hear a lot about the but-for taxes. The naming rights, NPR estimated, is worth about $8 million a year. The Vikings CFO said $4.5 to $7.5 million. Again, they get to apply that money that would not be available to them for not the stadium being built with the public's contribution. There's also all the additional advertising revenues and opportunities they have. So we don't really know how much hard cash the Vikings are going to have to dip in their pocket. They're not putting 50% of the cost of the stadium into this life cycle. They're putting other people's money into that and calling it their contribution. And again, this life cycle, this stadium should be 50 to 100 years. The lease should be nothing less than that. Flexibility means, as Representative Simon asked, yes. In 20 years, they will be back and saying, yeah, we'll stay here, but we need a $200 million upgrade or $400 million upgrade. It will never end. And that's the reality. So let's have the Vikings really put in money, because I think you will find they could get much closer to doing this on their own, and that should be where we start. What can you afford, and what do you need our help to get it done? And I'm sorry that I don't have time to comment about the jobs and the other things that I also think were inaccurately represented.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Sweet?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll stick to I'll watch the clock very carefully, but I do want to remind everybody this is a $1 billion transaction. A little bit about myself. I the 2008 Emmy Award-winning comedy ghostwriter for the Colbert Report. In addition to that, I've done 6 major projects for the University of Minnesota, very high-tech projects. The first system for the kids to register for classes. I've taught over there. I've worked in technology for 25 years. Feel free to look over that information. And today I also want to talk about the iDome, which was featured on CBS News. And at the end of the day, I wanted to thank Representative Winkler for bringing some good questions to the table. I also dabbled in a little real estate on the West Coast with some of the top Hollywood executives. So I have a little knowledge about real estate, and I think we all know, with a real estate deal, the first thing you do is look at comps. It's like the first question is, who's renting, who's going to pay rent? So these are the questions I look at. First thing I look at is the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. They just paid $1 billion for it. Guess what? When you look online, there's only 5 dates for the next 6 months. All right? That's not a good sign if you got a $6 million payment. And I think we all experienced the worst real estate disaster of the century, so I think we should know simple arithmetic. If I got to make a $6 million payment,
I'm going to look at the other property that was just built and see what income they're generating from the renters. So let's take a look at Senator Chamberlain's bill. He had a bill that allowed for a $1 billion loan. And with this proposal, it's kind of more of a first-class jobs bill because it would create 4 times the jobs. When I look at the issues down with the Cowboy Stadium, I want to do another event that would be a Watch Pick One Hollywood game show, a super commercial showdown. We did the artwork for AT&T. The senior marketing exec approved it. So I'm looking at some other opportunity for us to market to the global markets. With this $50,000 cash prize, would promote the Vikings, which we want to do with a first-class bill. And I say, why settle for coach? I actually started off working in the airline, so I know what first class was like because I got to fly for free everywhere. And all stadium bill Senate authors agree, and Senator Chamberlain and Senator Rosen both agreed that this plan, which was modeled after the 49ers, made a lot of sense. Basically, 26 companies all chipping in $50 million. It's not a complicated plan at all. And the top issues I saw on the table were the Metrodome. We have 6 events on the website for the U of M. None could afford the $3,000 a month. And, as far as no other stadiums have events in this economy, so you can take a look at the events that the U of M have. And the U of M, by the way, has a baseball stadium going up, so they will not be using the new stadium. And I think that's an important fact that everyone here knows that's in this industry, that they will not be using it for baseball. So take a look at the information about the 49ers and Raiders sharing the stadium. And then, of course, the comparison to the 49ers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Chuck Turchik, and then after that, Mike Catch.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Chuck Turchik. I live in Minneapolis. Various people here are either representing themselves or representing an organization or a corporation. I'll represent the rest of the population. The mayor of Minneapolis has repeatedly referred to the convention center taxes as hospitality taxes imposed by the state on the city of Minneapolis. This simply is not true. The state constitution would not allow the state to impose taxes on a single locality. The bill does not refer to an imposition by the state on the city of Minneapolis of these taxes. The bill itself refers to the authorization for the city to impose the taxes. In fact, tax is defined in the bill under Section 1, Article 4, Section 1, Subdivision 2D. Tax means the sales taxes imposed by the city under the special law. So why is my mayor insisting that these taxes are being imposed by the state? He's doing this because he has to convince his city council that these are not city expenditures, because that might trigger the Minneapolis City Charter provision requiring a referendum. At the same time, my mayor is saying that my mayor must convince you that it is a city expenditure. He must convince you and the rest of the population of the state. So he has said orally and in various written documents that this is the city share of the stadium, that it is the commitment of the city, that it is a city investment. And 5 of the 6 council members who wrote separate letters to the governor and to the authors of this bill, which the mayor attached to his letter to the governor, they referred to it as the local partner contribution. So it's kind of a two-step. It's either the state it's not city revenues, but it is the city share of the stadium. That's not the only dance that's going on here. The mayor testified before the Commerce Committee, and Representative Johnson asked him if there was anything in the bill waiving the city charter provision that called for a referendum. The mayor did not specifically answer that, but his answer said, well, the structure of this bill means that there's no city expenditure, so the city charter does not come into play. Why didn't the mayor tell the Representative Johnson that the waiver of the city charter provision is not needed, that Article 4, Section 4 is unnecessary? Because it is needed. Not to waive the charter provision, which it does on its face, but to preclude the courts from interpreting the mayor's claim that city revenues are not being used and prohibiting the courts from finding whether that's a legally valid argument or not. For those of you who are Republicans, I don't know who the Republicans are. You all look alike to me, basically. Republicans frequently say that we should have the government serves best that is closest to the people. And the people of Minneapolis have spoken. It might not be a wise decision that they, but they have decided by a 70% majority to have a charter referendum on issues like this. So I ask you to honor the citizens of Minneapolis, to honor the local government where government serves best, and not to shortcut the checks and balances and the separation of powers that the mayor is trying to do by not allowing the courts to rule on this issue. Thank you for your time. I hope you understood this better than I understood it.
Thank you very much. There's an amendment you might like to look at later. We'll talk about later. Mr. Catch.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I've been listening, like everybody else here, to all the great information that we've gotten, and we know that the stadium is going to create 600 additional new jobs. So at $980 million for this to be a jobs program, we're going to spend $16,333,333.30 per job. Now, I'm not quite sure how that's a jobs program. I think that we could probably hire people a lot less expensive than $16 million a job. But that's neither here nor there. I live in downtown Minneapolis, and I and 30,000 of my neighbors will be paying the bulk of the sales tax. As a matter of fact, I was certainly hoping that we would see sales tax relief once the convention center bonds were paid off. Obviously, extending out these bonds for another 25 years means that we will not see sales tax relief in Minneapolis in my lifetime. The thing about this is that members of the Tea Party, the conservative movement, always said that we're not going to tax, we're not going to unfairly tax, and we're certainly not going to tax by geographic boundary. And yet, because I and 30,000 people, the fastest growing part of the city of Minneapolis is the downtown area. We have condos and apartments springing up like mushrooms. And we're the ones paying the tax. It isn't somebody coming in from the suburbs. It's not somebody coming in from out of town to rent a hotel room that are paying for that new stadium or even paying for the baseball stadium. It's us. It's the people who live there 24/7, 365 days a year. It's unfair to us. And so far as the mayor is concerned, he knows that he doesn't have the votes to pass a referendum. Otherwise, we'd have a referendum. So why should we bypass the charter, which is really the city constitution? Because what we're basically doing is saying, we want you to take the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, the Minneapolis Constitution, throw it out the window. Because we want to bypass all that to basically give a special interest welfare. Because if you don't think this is a corporate bailout, if you don't think this is corporate welfare, well, I don't know what corporate welfare is if it isn't this particular bill. So I would thank you for your time, and please don't bail out another big company.
Thank you. And you forgot to identify yourself in the beginning, if you wouldn't mind doing that.
Michael Catch, and I live in downtown Minneapolis, and I am a member of the Republican Liberty Caucus and the North Star Tea Party.
Thank you. Laura Lehman, and then Ken Rocker. Good morning, or good evening. Do you want to just identify yourself for the tape?
Yes, my name is Laura Lehman, Madam Chair and committee members. I do not represent any group. I'm not here to further my own financial interest. As a resident of Hennepin County, I was denied a right to vote on the sales tax used to fund the Twins ballpark. The legislature waived the referendum requirement for that tax, and I learned that I would be paying it for 30 years. The bill written by the legislature at that time made it clear that any excess revenue would be used for libraries, youth sports, and to retire the bonds early. I opposed public funding of sports stadiums then, and I do now. I especially oppose that part of House File 2810 that lays claim to the 0.15% sales tax collected in Hennepin County as a source of backup revenue for a Vikings stadium. By what right does the state delay the county's bond payments? How can the state take that revenue when it was previously, there was previously written legislation that has already specified the use of excess funds. In addition, I would remark that the present legislature appears to be poised to do to the citizens of Minneapolis what was done to residents of Hennepin County, take away their referendum rights. The Minneapolis City Charter requires a referendum for stadium expenditures exceeding $10 million. To say that the referendum requirement does not apply or is void is so much legal legerdemain. The support of a majority of the Minneapolis City Council is no substitute for a referendum. Please amend House File 2810 to allow a referendum as called for in the Minneapolis City Charter. I cannot overemphasize that in poll after poll, the majority of Minnesotans oppose public financing of sports stadiums for privately owned teams. The citizens of this state have higher priorities for their tax dollars. If House File 2810 survives this committee, you should recall these facts before casting a vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rocker?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm here representing the Tavern League of Minnesota, the bowling proprietors, and as a citizen. I'm listed as an opponent of the stadium. I'm actually not an opponent of the stadium being built, and with some fine-tuning, I think that the state will get back more than the money that it invests. I'm specifically concerned about page 74 of the bill and the 4 blink-on methods to back up the amount of funding. The blink-on item number 2 is a sports-themed lottery game that is estimated on line 74.26 to raise $2.1 million. And I think realistically we have to look at this as an ice cream stand, and that's if there's one over here selling chocolate and all of a sudden somebody opens up one here selling strawberry, the chocolate sales are going to go way down. If you put a sports-themed lottery game in, whether it's for the Twins or the Vikings or any professional sports team, that's actually taking away from the existing general fund and the Environment and Natural Resources Fund. Given that, I guess I would suggest that you delete that number 2 blink-on item, because that is going to be coming out of state revenue if, in fact, it was enacted. Or in lieu of deleting it, I guess I would suggest or hope somebody would move that it be moved to the number 4 blink-off item and that it be capped at 2 or $2.5 million, whatever the committee should choose, but so that you limit the amount of money that might come out of the general fund. Thanks for the opportunity to appear before you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the list is Tom Pritchard. Good evening.
Madam Chair, my name is Tom Pritchard. I'm president of the Minnesota Family Council, and I'm here not to oppose the stadium per se, but to oppose the funding source for the state's portion, which would be a massive expansion of electronic gambling. The concern we have with this, and this is kind of in some respects tied into Section 7, the blink-on is, one, there's questions as to whether or not it will actually generate that enough revenue to meet what the projections are. But I think an even more serious problem is what this funding source targets. It really is targeting a very narrow range of people, low-income people who are disproportionate gamblers, but also problem gamblers. Electronic gambling is the most addictive form of gambling. Some coin it the crack cocaine of gambling. Studies show that with video slots, 1% of gamblers account for 30 to 50% of gambling revenues. And I think a reason we see such a large expansion of gambling, at least proposed into this bill, is because of the electronic gambling. And this is a massive expansion of gambling. They're looking at 2,500 to 3,500 sites authorizing this gambling with upwards of 30,000 electronic machines. So this is a major expansion of gambling. And I think along with that are the social costs of this gambling will exceed the benefits through gambling addiction, indebtedness, broken families, marriages, crime, and social problems, which state and local government will be called on to fill the gap for. I believe the state, in a sense, will be victimizing and targeting the people it should be protecting, the people of Minnesota. So I would encourage the committee to look for another source of revenue if it desires to move ahead with state funding. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We did have a few other people that had asked to testify. Harry Melander, Wayne Lumberg, and Shar Knutson. If you could come up.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Cher Knutson, and I'm president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. House File 2810, the construction of a stadium in downtown Minneapolis, provides opportunities for much-needed family-sustaining private sector jobs. As you probably know, Minnesota workers in the construction trades were the hardest hit in this recent recession. And that's why, as our economy recovers, it's so very vitally important to support projects that will create jobs in that sector. Over the 3 years this stadium is built, 13,000 Minnesota workers in construction and supply will be employed in private sector jobs that not only support their families, but put dollars back into Minnesota's economy that will lead to even more job creation. Now that's good. It's good for Minnesota, and it's real job creation. Once the stadium is complete, dollars will continue to flow into the economy through people working jobs in the stadium. The new stadium could require as many as 1,200 servers, double the number at the current Metrodome. So this project is a great example of a public-private partnership that will be a net good for Minnesota's economy. And so on behalf of Minnesota's working people, I respectfully urge you to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Pepin, committee members. I will always stay away from Harry. My name is Wade Luneberg, and I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of Unite here in Minnesota, the hospitality union here in Minnesota. We represent 6,000 workers across the state and in hotels, gaming, airports, and sports venues, 350,000 people across the country. Unite here has 600 good-paying vending and concession jobs at the current Metrodome. In addition, there are another 500 jobs tied to the facility involving security, ticket taking, and other services. We have achieved an agreement with the Minnesota Vikings that would call for the retention of the existing workforce, some of those members since 1963 at Met Stadium, that would actually call for their retention at the new facility and for the ability through neutrality to organize any expansion of the concessions operation. This is a significant, as the workforce at a new stadium would likely double. This is achieved by providing a level of access, amenities, customer service that is now expected at all major league sports venues nationwide. The best example right now of this level of service would be Target Field, which I think we can all agree has been wildly successful. Providing ticket holders with this new level of service and amenities is what our members do consistently at Target Field, Target Center, and the XL Arena. Unite here and the various clubs concessionaires have made these good jobs for our communities and their families. Also, for your serious consideration are the thousands of other jobs in hospitality, including our other 1,200 members in downtown Minneapolis. Minneapolis has a fantastic infrastructure of hospitality that's the envy of other large cities and other metro areas in the country. This would be greatly enhanced by a new facility, not just for the NFL game days, but also for what rolls into weekends for out-of-towners, conventioneers, and just plain Minnesotans at the dozens of other large events at the new expanded facility. At Unite Here, we're committed to moving workers and their families forward. And again, we think these are good jobs and that they're good for the state of Minnesota. Today, we ask that all legislators engage to address this proposal so that we can get Minnesota working again for my brothers and sisters in the trades, but also to provide more good jobs in the service sector that are badly needed. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Good night.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Committee members, my name is Harry Melander, and I'm the chair of the Minnesota Building and Construction Trades Council. Our organization advocates for over 50,000 Minnesota construction workers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and thank you for the opportunity to possibly create thousands of employment opportunities for Minnesotans. I'm here to speak in favor of this House file, the stadium construction bill, as we like to call it. This recent recession was tough for all Minnesotans, but it was especially tough for workers in the construction industry. When the market took a hit, construction workers felt it more than anyone. The unemployment rate in our industry is still over 20%, 3 times higher than the state's overall unemployment. A new stadium is the public-private partnership, the partnership that Minnesotans needs to keep people working and get the private sector of the construction industry back to work. Over the 3-year period, it will take 75 highly skilled construction workers, Minnesotans, to do roughly 4.3 million hours of work on this project. That amounts to roughly $300 million in wages that will go directly back into our economy. Skilled construction workers will do the job with quality, pride, safely, and build it for Minnesota. And not only will construction workers benefit, but the whole state will. During construction, the jobs that will created will generate tax revenue for the general fund and the Minnesota Unemployment Insurance Fund. In addition, this bill ensures that the Vikings, an economic asset to our state, will remain in Minnesota for the foreseeable future. What more, all this economic growth and revenue will be generated without a single new tax on the state or local level, with the Vikings agreeing to pay for millions of dollars toward the construction cost of our stadium. This is a win for construction professionals, for the state of Minnesota, and our entire region. I urge you to support this House file and the jobs that it will create for Minnesotans. We need help from you, and we need help from you today to continue the conversation. This does not need to stop tonight, and we would appreciate your support on this issue.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, and then I have a Dennis Berchi. O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair and representatives. Dennis Furchi from Afton and also Planet Earth. Trying to hang on. So, thanks for the opportunity. My concern is, reading the papers and so forth, I sense a gap. Maybe if it's true or not, you can tell me. A gap in the research. I mean, the governor a while back requested of the Metropolitan Council that they do a risk assessment. I looked at that report. It's as most everything in the discussion, it's all financial, dollars. Anyway, I've got I can supply references for you on some of these concerns, but I think there's more findings, more questions regarding risks. Specifically, I read my own concern is, what risks do we have to individuals, to the youth, to society in general, as we assume that we can continue on to enable entertainment and games that are based on intentional harm? I define that as violence, intentional harm to others. I also want to share that football is presently being challenged by numerous past players. and they're experiencing severe health problems. University of Boston has that research documented. Like I say, I can provide references to sources if you wish. I don't have them with me today. I'd say yes, yes, yes to the jobs, but I think that they need to be worthy jobs. We need to restore the economy, but if we're going to recover, we need a worthy economy. Jobs that are setting up these mentorships for our children are not proving out to be too great of a thing. And just in purpose for humor here, I said, if I've been talking for a while about putting tax on pop, I think even a legislator or two has proposed that. Okay, no problem. I can take care of this. 20 seconds left. Yeah, how about taxing the concessions, taxing the pop? And then maybe we'll need to expand those seats. Thank you very much. Good luck to planet Earth. This is
Hold on just a second.
too much.
Representative Winkler has a question for you, I believe.
Well, just not a question, but an opportunity to clarify. I assume he was not saying that the construction jobs that would create the stadium for construction are not worthy jobs.
Well, if you construct something for a purpose that really has some serious questions, I mean, I don't want to enable anything that I deem unworthy. I don't want my children, I don't have children, but if I did, I don't want our children to be mentored into thinking this is a desirable thing to set your goals for. I listened to the reports out of Canada, some of these hockey players. He says, 1 month before the game start, I got to get drunk. I just go insane. Yeah. This intentional harm is leading us to problems. I don't want to build a building for it. Any other questions?
No.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've moved through our list of witnesses, but I'm wondering if there might be, I don't see the mayor here, I'm wondering if there might be someone from Minneapolis who might be willing, the president of the council, if you wouldn't mind. I just had a few questions.
I'm not with the council, but I'm from the city of Minneapolis. Can I testify?
Sir, we had folks sign up via email to testify. I'm actually asking a question of the councilwoman here. And I guess my question is, and part of my concern with the bill has to do with the charter. And so I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about the charter and about your view of what it means to Minneapolis. And I understand the mayor feels that this doesn't apply. And I've been looking at the section that of the bill, page 43.26, and I've been reading the charter, and I'm having a hard time understanding why it doesn't apply, and I'm wondering if you could address that, and if you could maybe just address why what the council's view is on that, because I brought it with, and I think I'll read part of it, which is maybe what will help address my concern. It says, the City of Minneapolis, Minneapolis Community Development Agency, or any city department, agency, commission, or board shall use no city resources over $10 million for the financing of professional sports facilities without the approval of a simple majority of the votes cast on the question in a ballot question put to the public at the next regularly scheduled election. And it goes on and on, talks about bonds and sales taxes and things like that. And so I'm just wondering if you could maybe go on record. I mean, I hate to put you on the spot. I was hoping the mayor would be here to talk about his bill. But if you could explain to me your view of why that the charter doesn't apply and why you don't feel that the voters of Minneapolis deserve a vote on this, because I think that's very important, and I'd just like you to help us out here.
Madam Chair, Barbara Johnson, Minneapolis City Council President. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. The city's charter provision, and I would like to invite our city attorney down if she could join me, it would be helpful.
It's fine.
Oh, here she is. Here she is. Susan Siegel, our city attorney. Madam Chair, our charter provision is one of many charter provisions. We actually have a charter provision that forbids us from spending more than $15 million for any city facility, including streets, sewer, water improvements. We have regularly asked the legislature to exempt us from the charter requirements. Since 1980, the state has overridden our city charter around 20 times, over 20 times. We, as a first-class city, have limitations, but we also know that these kinds of facilities that keep us in a competitive arena are facilities that require more than that $10 million investment, as well as our $15 million investment that we have a charter provision regarding. So, Madam Chair, we also, and I'll let the city attorney speak to this, but the mayor is speaking about the fact that we do not have the ability as a city to levy a sales tax without the state's approval. And so the way this bill is drafted, the state gives the city the ability to continue the sales tax that has been in existence since in the early 1980s, or 90s, excuse me. And those provisions that were charter provisions did not apply at that time.
Ms. Siegel?
Madam Chair, Susan Siegel, I'm the Minneapolis City Attorney. And the 1986 sales tax law that Council President Johnson referred to dictates the uses for those taxes. So those are dictated by the state. The provision that was crafted by the authors of this bill, Representative Lanning and Senator Rosen, provided that the portion that represents the city's contribution would go directly to the revenue commissioner and would never come within the city's hands. And so it's not a decision by the city of Minneapolis in that sense, and this bill does no more than dictate the uses of these taxes, just as it does with any sales tax that it authorizes at the local level.
Ms. Siegel, if it doesn't apply, then why does it need to be in the bill?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, which portion? Is it the
Hey, it's
section
43.26, Section 4.
Charter limitations not to
Yes.
apply? And maybe I should have the council president talk about Target Center, but an important provision to the city is the ability, the flexibility in these taxes to be able to address capital needs for Target Center. And so it's in connection with that, one of the city's criteria for deciding to support this legislation, and that is why it's in the legislation here.
Madam Chair, Target Center is owned by the city. We have to make capital improvements to Target Center on a regular basis to keep it competitive as a first-class facility, and those expenditures could exceed $10 million, could exceed that charter cap.
President Johnson, what is the value to you of the charter? Is it, you talked about it being overridden 20 times by the legislature, which I don't believe gives it, just because it's been overridden, I don't think that means it's right to override it again if we've been wrong in the past. But I'm just wondering what your view is of the charter, because to me the language is pretty clear. It directly talks about sports facilities, so it's pretty clear that what the will of the people is, and I'm just wondering if you don't view this as a valid document. One of the Minneapolis witnesses said he viewed it as like a constitution for Minneapolis. But I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what your feeling is on the charter and what it means, or doesn't it mean anything since it's been overridden 20 times? Maybe it should just be thrown away, because it seems like that the city isn't standing up for the taxpayers that they represent, and I'm having a hard time understanding why this charter doesn't apply, or what you believe the value is of the charter.
Madam Chair, I view the charter very seriously as a guiding document for the city of Minneapolis, but I also understand the city is, like any city in this state, a creature of the state, and the state makes rules about how revenues are collected in our city, which revenues can be collected in our city, how those revenues are to be used. And so that is why the provision is in the bill that is in front of you, because the state has control over the city.
Well, I'll move on for now. It seems like a lot of fancy sideswiping so that the Minneapolis Council maybe didn't have to take a difficult vote. But does anyone else have any questions, as long as we have the city here?
Madam Chair.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Good to see you, Council President. You know, there's a couple of other, I think, troubling provisions to me that relate to the city that I just wanted to get your perspective on. On page 23, for example, this is still in Article 1, Section 17. This is lines 29 through 32. And I'll just read them quickly because it's short. It says the subdivision establishes a procedure for all land use and development reviews and approvals by the City of Minneapolis for the stadium and related stadium infrastructure, and supersedes all land use and development rules and restrictions and procedures imposed by other law, charter, or ordinance, including without limitation, and there's other sections, et cetera. So could you explain that a little? It seems like it's pretty draconian that in a way that this bill is now kind of dictating land use policy for the city, and that's a little bit troubling to me. So I wanted to know where that comes from and what your perspective is on that.
Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, that is language that very closely mirrors the language that was in the Twins bill, the target field approvals, where we had an implementation committee that sat and met about these land use issues. The City Council was represented on that committee, and then we came to the City Council with a agreement package that was an up or down vote, of the council about all the land use issues. And so this language very, very closely mirrors exactly what happened with Target Field, which we are very pleased with the outcome of that as far as land use in our city.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Hornstein.
Then another one on the next page, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with too, and perhaps it's also from the previous stadium bill, but it says that the City Council shall not impose any unreasonable conditions on the recommendations of the implementation committee, nor take any action or impose any conditions that will result in delay from the time frames and construction. You know, that's also troubling too, because it's anytime we have a state law that says the City Council shall not impose, and I don't even know what an unreasonable condition would be. So that's also troubling, and I wanted to get your perspective on that as well.
Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair and Representative Hornstein, that also mirrors the language in the Target Field Twins Stadium agreement. And actually, I served on that implementation group. And the true goal was to get through the city principles about land use in our city, but also not create roadblocks to having things take too long to get through for approvals and increase the cost of the project or unnecessarily be a roadblock to the project.
Thank you.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Johnson, could you do you have any idea how much money the Minnesota Twins generate for the city of Minneapolis, for the people of Minneapolis?
Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair, Senator Erdahl, I do know our entertainment tax number, which was a number that the entertainment tax was not imposed at the Metrodome for the Twins, but it is imposed at Target Field. And our revenues on our entertainment tax went up about $4 million a year in the first 2 years of the Twins being in Target Field.
Representative Scalzi.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And it's nice to see you here because it prompted another question in my mind. I also served on the Capital Investment Committee, and I have for probably 6 years. And I know that we've dealt with projects in Minneapolis. One is the Target Center, the renovation of the Target Center. So I've been there a number of times. Another item that we dealt with was the interchange, or whatever the name of it is sort of like a non-depot
yes.
by Target Field, because you're able, after an event, it takes like 2 hours to get people out of town. And this is needed, and it needed state money to get people out of town in 45 minutes instead of 2 hours, is what I recall. And then I also recall another visit that we had there related to the Metrodome and on 35W, just southwest of the Metrodome. The state was being asked to fund some major interchange corrections there because it's so difficult to get people in and out of Minneapolis. And I guess what I'm leading up to is that, it's interesting that you talk about these kinds of facilities that keep us in a competitive arena. Well, my Ramsey County cities, work with St. Paul. So I'm just very nervous about having so many things and so many corrections. And when is enough for the city of Minneapolis, and when are we going to be worrying about more of kind of a economic parity in the metro area? I just don't know how much more you can take in the city of Minneapolis without needing these expensive corrections to the interchanges to handle the people that are in there for all these events.
Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair and Representative Scalzi, the interchange is a Hennepin County project, and it's a wonderful project. It mirrors actually the project that's going on in downtown St. Paul at Union Depot. And we are preparing in both cities for major changes in transportation, increasing transit. But I will just say at the Metrodome, the beauty of the Metrodome site is, as people have spoken before, is that we know how traffic moves there now. Yes, we're going to have an improvement on 35 so that we don't have so much traffic congestion on Washington Avenue getting in and out of our downtown. But that part of that was funded through the federal dollars that came in after the bridge collapse, after our 35W bridge collapse. So we're proud of the fact that we can move as many people that come into our downtown as do, and we want to see more people come into our downtown. And so that's why we're supporting the Vikings Stadium. But I understand the concerns about regional equity, and I do think that, we have the county's, I'm trying to think, Transit Improvement Board, where all the counties share revenues, and those revenues are, I think, allocated on a regional basis and try not to favor any particular part of the metropolitan area.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, nice to see you. I just wanted to ask, could you talk a little bit in the same way about the Elliott Park neighborhood, which is just to the south of the Metrodome site, and kind of what plans are to help that neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Council President Johnson.
Madam Chair and Representative Green, actually the Elliott Park neighborhood has been one of the biggest supporters of the Metrodome in general, and then also the expansion of the Vikings facility. They've been a great partner in dealing with some of the issues that come about because of so many people in their neighborhood, but then also taking advantage of the development. And they've participated in a small area plan that identifies the Metrodome as a long-term site for their community to be a part of, and I think have been helped by the Metrodome and really feel like it's an important asset to that side of town and want to see the expansion.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually for Ms. Siegel. In looking at Section 4 on page 43 and 44, there is this special law language, and I haven't studied this issue in detail, but I wonder whether it would be constitutional for us to pass this law without the approval of the Minneapolis City Council, or if there's some question about that. Is that settled, that without local approval it wouldn't be constitutional, or is it an open question?
Ms. Siegel?
This isn't, Madam Chair and Representative Winkler. There was a debate with the House and Senate legal staff, the professional staff, and the conclusion was that the general law dictating when local approval was necessary, which is then embedded in the state constitution, saying that the legislature shall establish when local approval is necessary, that it is required under the general law and therefore required by the state constitution.
Representative Winkler.
So, Madam Chair, Ms. Siegel, just a simple translation of that means that if the City Council of Minneapolis doesn't approve this special law related to its charter, it wouldn't be valid.
Ms. Siegel.
Madam Chair and Representative Winkler, that is correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, I think we've made it through all of our testifiers. I think this might be a good time to have Representative Lanning and Representative Morrow come back up. And we do have several amendments, and it's okay with the committee. I think maybe we could go through the amendments first. Since we have been talking about, since I just had the council up, I would like to start, if it would be okay, with Amendment A33. That is my amendment, so I will move that. And that amendment basically removes the Section 4 language on page 43 that the charter limitations not to apply. And the reason is because I think that the residents have put in their charter that they want a vote, and I think that they deserve a vote on this, and I don't think it's right to circumvent the process, and that's why I'm offering it. And I guess I'll turn it over to you two for comment, and then open it up to anyone else. Representative Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I understand the concern that you and others have with regard to this, but we need to be remembering that the City of Minneapolis does not have control over how those tax revenues are to be spent. Current law specifies how they're to be spent. The state says how they're to be spent and earmarked. And this bill does the same thing. It has the state authorizing the City of Minneapolis to be able to, or tell them how these monies are to be spent or used. And I come from a charter city, Madam Chair, and charter is a sacred document for any community. And you obviously, as a city official, want to make sure that you follow your charter provisions. But in this particular case, the city council does not have control over that now, and under this bill they wouldn't as well. And Madam Chair, if it's your wish that this amendment go on, so be it. I don't know how you feel about this one versus the other amendment that has similar provisions. That's the A23 amendment.
I won't be offering that, Representative Lanning.
Okay. Well, you're the chair of the committee, and if that's your wish, then so be it.
Any members like to discuss the issue before we take it to a vote? Representative Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a very strong proponent of local government and local control, but I think the fact of the charter itself goes beyond local control. It goes to the very core, the people themselves. And I think without removing this, we are doing a disservice to the people of Minneapolis.
Representative Green.
Thank you. I think he said it all.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you. Well, I'll support your amendment. I still oppose the bill, but I think that the least we could do is honor what people in Minneapolis did in the 90s, and I'm glad you are proposing this, and I'll support it.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment before we move to a vote? Question. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A33 amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
No.
Motion does prevail. Okay, then there are several other amendments in our stack. Why don't we, I think they're in order, so why don't we just take them in order.
starting out with, there's an A21 amendment. Anyone want to claim that one?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Representative Morrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I don't know that anyone is offering the 821 amendment at this time.
Okay. Set that aside. A22.
Madam Chair, I will move the 822 amendment.
Representative Winkler moves the A22 amendment to your amendment.
Madam Chair, members, the 822 amendment removes the Hennepin County ballpark tax as a backup source of funding in the event that the gambling expansion revenue do not cover the cost of the Vikings stadium. And, I mean, this is a classic bait and switch on Hennepin County taxpayers to claim that this is for a ballpark, and then and that the excess revenue can be used for upgrades for things like libraries and youth sports and other things, and then suddenly it's captured by the legislature to be used as a backup funding source for a stadium. And I just think that would be a terribly unfortunate thing to do. And it doesn't harm the funding source of the bill, which is the gambling expansion. It just makes clear that the Hennepin County taxpayers are not going to be left picking up this tab as well.
Representative Morrow.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Winkler. I understand why this amendment would be brought. I think that we've heard, both of us, a good deal of concern about this provision. We certainly understand the committee moving on this amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
Again, I'll support this amendment as well, and I think that members may have received a letter from Chair Opat from the Hennepin County Board, and he has one sentence in here that I think summarizes why we should support this. It says, this provision in the bill that Representative Winkler is proposing to remove would usurp local control and change the local sales tax the majority of this board voted in 2006 to approve. So this is clearly an issue of local control, and we should all support this amendment.
Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Nope, seeing none. All those in favor of the A22 amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
No.
Motion does prevail. We already addressed the concerns of the A23. That was mine. We're not going to do it. A27, didn't skip that, okay. A28. Anyone want to take the A28? Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do like that they're providing for continuity of employment for the workers. I just would like to allow the workers some freedom of choice in their new location and allow those workers the same freedom that presently thousands of Minnesota workers have, and that's to decide whether or not to join or pay dues to a union.
Representative Morrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, thank you, Representative Quam. Representative Quam, I would speak in opposition to this amendment, causing me great concerns that we would now insert an issue which we have seen on the House floor ourselves has great division. I believe if you want to pass a bill that does something like this to public workers and collective bargaining, not public workers, excuse me, Representative Quam, that you should run as a separate bill. I don't think you should try to insert this into this bill this time. So I would sit here and oppose this amendment.
Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, Representative Morrow, actually the intent that you have in there of inserting the continuity of the bargaining unit to the new location and is yours, so I think it's consistent to add that freedom of choice to the workers' options.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I too oppose this amendment. Like I said, it's interfering in the bargaining rights. Granted, there is they're talking about continuity of workers. The workers currently have chosen to belong to a union, and this is just undermining their ability to make that choice. And so I stand in opposition to this amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is probably one of the only issues that I ever, my no vote on the final bill is one of the only issues I part ways with my union friends. But this is just a thinly veiled, or not so thinly veiled, right to work effort to inject this whole right to work discussion in this bill. It's wholly inappropriate, and I'd strongly oppose it.
Representative Winkler.
Well, and Madam Chair, Representative Quam, we do strongly disagree on this issue, but in addition to that, your amendment doesn't do, I don't think, what you think it does. It's not drafted in the correct way, even if you wanted to deprive workers of their right to be represented by a union. According to federal law, unions are required to cover members of a collective bargaining unit. Once a collective bargaining unit is certified, everybody who works there is covered in it, and the union is required to do that. It's required to represent them, and the unions collect the dues, not the collective bargaining units. So I think your amendment language is in violation of federal law, which dictates how collective bargaining units are treated and whether they're represented by unions, and your amendment simply doesn't do what you think it does, even if it was a good idea, which it most certainly is not. So I think you should, I hope you'd reconsider this amendment. It really is, it doesn't work, and it's a really bad idea.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Winkler. I saw that if there was a need for the language in here, that there was a break in the relationship implied by the language. And I do take your advice on this, and I will pull this amendment and look at improving the language. And thank you for the advice.
Madam Chair?
Representative Winkler.
Representative Quam, it's still a bad idea, so before you think about improving your amendment, it's good that it's gone for tonight.
Thank you. Okay, the A29 amendment. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A29, in this section, there's quite a bit of discussion about entities. And, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we amend the bill with Amendment A29.
So moved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In this section, there's quite a bit of naming of entities. And in there, it has public officers. Now, I'm fine with having the entities there. Public officers, like any other citizens, could invest, and I don't see a reason to have the general designation there. If there are any specific public officers that need to, in the course of their duties, engage in this, then I think the more appropriate thing is to specially designate them or list them here instead of just using a general public officers.
Representative Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would have a question of staff, either Ms. Dyson or Mr. McCormick, with regard to what the intent of this language, including public officers, really is. I certainly understand the concern that Representative Quam raises about you don't want inside deals here where elected officials can somehow benefit. But I'm unclear as to how the legal experts would interpret this language and the purpose of this language in the first place.
Ms. Dyson.
Madam Chair and members, the provision being amended is in the appropriation bonding section, article of the bill that authorizes the issuance of state appropriation bonds. And this particular subdivision has to do with giving authority to public entities to purchase those bonds as public investments. And so it lists the state, the investment board, public officers, municipal corporations, political subdivisions, public bodies, giving them authority to purchase the and invest in appropriation bonds. With your question about what does it mean by public officer, I guess I don't have a good answer for that, but I can say that the language mirrors that of the other appropriation bills, including the one from the tobacco securitization bonding bill from last session, and this section is typically written by bond counsel, and so I'll let it go with that.
Thank you. Representative Morrow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe to clarify, and maybe a follow-up question, what I'm hearing in the answer is that what this reference to public officers is, it would still be the investment of public funds as opposed to maybe the investment of private funds that we were hearing about before. Am I right in understanding that the reference here is public officers acting in their public capacity?
Ms. Dyson?
Madam Chair, Representative Morrow, yes.
Representative Lanning?
Madam Chair, given that answer, I don't think this is doing what I think Representative Quam is trying to address here. It doesn't address individual investments, but rather public entities.
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess Representative Quam, what is it we're concerned about here we're trying to protect? Is it the public entities being able to invest in these bonds, or are we talking about me or you as a public officer, public elected official, putting our money into these bonds and investing in these bonds? What is it you're trying to prevent? I guess the question I have.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Nelson. It's the reading of it. There is no stipulation that it's just public funds, so the implication that somebody could take that there is, some inside activity. And that was my concern. I didn't want to have it designated there if it didn't need to be, because to me it doesn't look good to list entities and then public officials. If it was required, I'd prefer them listed instead of a general designation. And that's just a concern I had on the language.
Representative Morrow?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And if I might, Representative Quam, to suggest that both Representative Lanning and I will continue to look at this, but I think part of the problem is that a public entity may have difficulty making the investment decision if the public officers cannot be involved in the decision. But I do take your concern about you want to make sure that there's no private investment, no of the insider trading. So what I would ask you to consider is to withdraw the amendment for the moment, allow us to continue to talk with staff to make sure that this is only authorizing the public officers on behalf, in their capacity as a public officer, representing a public entity to make this investment decision.
Representative Quam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm very open to working with you to take care of the concern, and I therefore withdraw this amendment.
Quam withdraws the amendment. Next on the list is A30. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move Amendment A30 to this bill.
So moved.
And I understand the reason for this section to allow the city flexibility, although I wish to, with this amendment, constrict it to just the city of Minneapolis. There are 3 other cities of the first class, and I don't think we understand what possible future ramifications would be opened up by, carte blanche, giving this to those other 3 cities without, further discussion. So the intent of this is not to at all restrict the activity in this bill for the purpose of this bill, but to prevent possible unintended consequences in the other 3 cities.
I think I'll have Representative Lanning or Representative Morrow. Did you want to comment on that? Or
thank you, Madam Chair. I'm certainly okay with restricting this to the city of Minneapolis as a city of the first class. The original intent of this language was to provide the same flexibility to other first-class cities like we were providing in this bill to the city of Minneapolis, and their ability to have some flexibility when when it came to deciding how to appropriate these funds. But to be honest, I have not heard from any of the other first-class cities that they want this language. So I'm certainly okay with restricting it to the city of Minneapolis. And I guess I would ask staff, the rest of this amendment doesn't change the intent. It just changes the format of how these issues are addressed. I'm referring to the line, page 73, line 6, and also lines 7 through 12. Does this amendment in any way change the intent of the original language?
Ms. Dyson?
Madam Chair and Representative Lanning, I don't believe so. It's taking out the definition of city of the first class because the amendment just says Minneapolis, and then it's, instead of having a definition of capital project of regional significance, it just inserts that language into the main paragraph. It shortens it up.
Okay, given that, I have no...
Representative Lanning. Representative Skelzy?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I guess I just would wonder if you're wanting to prevent the city of St. Paul from using some of their sales tax money in the future for a different purpose, say for Excel Center, because right now it's dedicated to River Center and the neighborhoods, and I'm just wondering if this would be restrictive then, so St. Paul would not be able to change where they use their sales tax money in the future.
Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, Representative Sculsey, my intent isn't to single out any individual city. My intent is this is not, I don't take this flexibility lightly. I mean, we've had testifiers talk about shifting around sales tax from this purpose to that purpose, and I don't want to treat this topic as trivial. If there's a need, the legislature should address it individually. I just have concerns that we may not know what possible effects in the years to come if we have this in there. And it could be other cities. I had not even considered that specific item you had. I just fear unintended consequences.
Representative Skelzy.
Ms. Chair, thank you, Ms. Chair, and maybe Representative Lanning had something he wanted to add to this. I would just think then, if that's your concern, we should take out Section 3.
Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, Representative Sculsey, I don't have an issue with the overall purpose of this bill. I have issues with different components of the bill, and I'm trying to improve those. I think if that section was removed, we would cause the bill not to function. And I'm trying to improve and take care of some issues as opposed to kill the bill.
Madam Chair.
Representative Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope we don't get confused here about another amendment. The 0930 does delete Section 3, and to me that guts the bill, and that takes Minneapolis, takes the option away from Minneapolis as well as the other cities. But the A30 amendment, with the clarifications that have been offered here, I'm okay with the A30.
Representative Beard.
Well, if they're okay with the 8:30, perhaps I could recommend to my colleague, Representative Sculsey, that between now and the next 2 or 3 stops, if Minneapolis or St. Paul should come forward and say, please put us in too, I'm sure that the bill authors would be happy to add another first-class city by the name of St. Paul. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the A30 amendment? Okay, seeing none, why don't we go ahead and vote on it? All those in favor of the A30 amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay?
No.
Motion does prevail. The A31 amendment. Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, the A31 amendment, I will not be presenting, but I would present the A32. The intent is that, well,
Would you
should I
like to
move
move
it?
your amendment?
Madam Chair, I move Amendment A32.
So moved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My feeling is that this is a major endeavor, a statewide endeavor. This requires a great deal of activity legislatively, committing hundreds of millions of dollars. It grants powers, creates an entity, and that the legislature should have some voice in the constitution of the membership of this new entity. In the language of the A31 was a possible example of modifying it. The least amount, I feel, is that the advice and consent of the legislature through the Senate process would be the minimum that we would ensure that we do have some sort of influence on the membership and the constitution of this new entity that we're forming.
Representative Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Representative Quam for not offering the A31. That amendment, in my view, is not workable and not advisable. And I'm okay with the A32 amendment. I think it should be noted that it's quite unusual for the House to advocate more power for the Senate. But that's what this does.
Representative Quam, why did you make it the Senate and not the House?
Madam Chair, if there is a advice for a friendly verbal change to the amendment, I am open to that.
Madam Chair, the House does not have that advice and consent power.
Representative Lanning, yes, that's right.
Madam Chair.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Quam, I can understand where you're coming from on this, and I know understand, as was explained here, how the Met Council, when the Metrodome was being built, how it changed from being a region-wide to just a simply Minneapolis-based council, because that's where the funding was coming from, and I can understand the way that's the appointment, and this is going to be that. I'm not really opposed to this. It's just I have some concerns about it. But I can understand where you're coming from. I mean, the state's going to have a significant investment on this, as opposed to the Metrodome, where the state had no investment in it, and that's why it became just a Minneapolis-only appointment process. But I'm still going to vote against this, but I can understand where you're coming from.
Representative Morrow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Quam, I'm okay with it generally as Representative Lanning, but the question came up to both of us as we're looking at this. As you look at Subdivision 2, Part C, the city's appointments, I would at least invite you to consider whether the Senate should be approving the people that the city is appointing to the authority. I can see where the Senate might approve the governor's appointments because that's part of the state legislative body, but I'm not so sure that the Senate should be approving the city's appointments. So I'd ask you to consider whether you'd be willing to limit it to the 3 members that are appointed by the governor.
Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, I'm always open to advice and suggestions, and I would take that as a friendly suggestion to this, because we are then making progress towards having some legislative input.
Representative Dyson, do you need a minute to come up with the language?
Ms. Dyson.
What did I say? Representative Miss Dyson, sorry. Demoted you.
Madam Chair, I believe the amendment would be modified to read on, so it would say page 8, line 17, after the period, insert, and then delete the paragraph marking the E, so that, so page 8 after line 17, excuse me, after the period, insert, and then the sentence, and it would read appointments under this paragraph instead of subdivision are subject to the advice and consent of the Senate, et cetera. And I'll mark one up for Ms. Hanson.
Everybody understand that amendment? Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, I understand the amendment. I assume Representative Quam can just incorporate it without us having to vote on it. But the question I have is whether Mr. Mondale is currently subject to Senate confirmation as the chairman of the Sports Facilities Commission. He's desperately shaking his head no. And I guess the question is, what's the wisdom of changing the structure of the Sports Facilities Commission, even though it's being retitled and slightly modified? I don't really see the wisdom in changing that. It by and large seems to work as it is now without having to give more authority to the state Senate, which I would remind Representative Quam was in DFL hands for like 40 years. So you could be looking at another 40-year drought. You don't know. You just might want to be careful about that.
Representative Quam.
Madam Chair, this is an order of magnitude more money. It's a great deal of money. I was not here when, the previous or the existing commission or the Met Council or other entities were created without what I feel would be appropriate legislative advice and consent, at least. And because of past practices doesn't mean that I can't look at, if we're going to do something new, let's make it better.
Representative Quam, are you okay with incorporating the changes recommended by Ms. Dyson?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Any other discussion on the A32 amendment? Members, please vote so I can clearly hear the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
No.
Motion prevails. We'll move on to the A12 0930 amendment. Representative Skelzy.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. The 0930, and I've heard people say that's going to gut the bill. I have to tell you that this bill, in my estimation, is kind of using leverage to pass a bill, which I think is, I don't like to do that politically. I think that this bill is using the Target Center renovations to get the votes of the Minneapolis City Council. I mean, that's obvious if you read the newspaper. I think this bill is using the charities to say, well, we'll throw you this bone if you go along with this bill. I think that what's happening with this bill is that everyone's ending up with something, and the Excel Center is probably going to be damaged by this greatly because of the fact that, as Councilmember Johnson talked about, you have to have competitive facilities. Well, this throws the Excel Center out of competition by renovating the Target Center and by building this new Vikings stadium. It's not good for the Excel Center. It's not good for St. Paul. It's not good for Ramsey County. And I just don't think it's right to be using those parts as leverage to gain the votes necessary to pass a new stadium bill that's going to benefit the Vikings. So that's my amendment. I realize I'm the only one here from Ramsey County, probably, so.
Representative Lanning.
Madam Chair, as I mentioned earlier, I included the first-class cities to give flexibility, in part because of the Excel problem. And I did not hear anything from the city of St. Paul in support of this language that gave them flexibility. And I have also, on numerous occasions, invited the city of St. Paul to come forward with their ideas or proposals on how we specifically might address their problem, and we haven't gotten very far with that to this point. And I would ask and urge a no vote on this 0930.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Skelzy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have to say that, I've followed public school referendums in the past, and usually there's something in it for everybody, and that's how you get everybody to vote yes on the referendum. That's how it works. This bill I see as picking winners and losers, and I think the XL is going to be a loser. And I just think that it's wrong. And speaking as a Ramsey County resident, I have to just let you know how strongly I object to doing that to my cities.
Any other questions or comments to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor of the 0930 amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
Nay.
No.
Motion does not prevail. The 0932 amendment. Is anyone claiming the 0932 amendment? Representative Lanning?
Madam Chair, I'm unclear as to the language as to which commission is referred to here. Is it the Amateur Sports Commission? I'm a supporter and have been for years of the Amateur Sports Commission, but this is not something that has been brought to me by them as something that they have requested. We've crafted some language in here to provide access to amateur sports 10 days a year, and we've put in provisions in the bill that would make sure that they are charged only what the real costs would be for being able to use it. So we've been trying to protect them. So I really have some questions or concerns with regard to this amendment.
Okay. No one has moved the amendment at this point. Does anyone wishing to move the 0932 amendment? If not, there's no need to go forward with it. Okay. That concludes the amendments, I believe. Is there any other amendments I'm missing? I think we're back to the bill, and Representative Lanning, Representative Morrow, I'm going to ask for a roll call on this vote because I think it's important that we have transparency in the process. And having said that, I'll turn it over to you, and you can wrap it up and make your final comments, and anyone who else wants to comment or ask questions can still do that. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps before they wrap up their comments, just an observation and a question. On page 17 of the bill, 17.26, you may have mentioned this, and I was thinking of something else. 17.26, gentlemen. The state shall contribute $1.5 million each year. Where does that come from? The general fund? And are we obligating a future legislature or binding them on that? I'm just looking for an explanation.
Representative Lanning.
Madam Chair and Representative Beard, that would come out of the revenue proceeds that are generated through the electronic pull tabs.
Okay. Madam Chair, thank you, yes. And then the second one is more just an observation because I don't think we're done wrestling with this one yet. On page 11.25, under the, I'm sorry, it's not there, it's 15. Employment, hiring, and recruitment, quotas. I know this is a touchy subject, but gentlemen, and Representative Morrow, you're very familiar with this, our good work on the Transportation Committee, trying to accomplish the DBE and TGB and now the veterans' preferences and so on and so forth, and trying to work within federal guidelines. Just a few weeks ago, the Commissioner of Human Rights dropped a new number on us that I think implied that the City of Minneapolis had to reach a 32% goal for contractors on heavy projects like this, and I don't know how that's going to end up. But I know it's got those of us that worked very diligently to craft very carefully and work with good faith and thoughtfulness to try to get things done with MnDOT. All of a sudden now we're scrambling trying to figure out what this then means. So I just want to point out that you may have an expectation here where there's going to be some turbulence, and I know we've still got a couple of weeks to go and until if and when this hits the governor's desk. But I just want to, as a good committee member, just point that out, that there's something going on there that we need to resolve.
Representative Morrow.
Just a very brief response. Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Beard. phoning a friend back here, just finding out that this is standard Minneapolis language that it uses in its projects, and I don't think we're in a position to explain the language we're for, but I'm sure they've heard your comments.
Representative McFarland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the authors for all the hard work they've been doing on this. I know it's not an easy thing. I did a survey in my community, and 53% of the people, and I know it's not a lot, but it's enough that really feel there's a value to having an NFL team, the Vikings, in Minnesota. While this may not be the perfect package yet, I think it's worthy of continuing forward, and I trust the authors will continue to find additional ways to improve it as they move forward. So I will support this.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and also commend the authors of the bill for the hard work that they've put into this. I think as it goes through the process, there are still changes that obviously are going to be made. Frankly, I'd like to see a provision with where more private investors would enter into this, and hopefully that may happen at some point yet. But I think it's important to move this through the process. I think that this is something that needs to reach the floor of the House of Representatives to allow a vote of 134 members. And the people of Minnesota expect that at some point some type of conclusion, one way or the other, is going to be reached.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of the comments I was going to share have been already shared, so I'll just kind of step past those. One of the things that the legislature is oftentimes ridiculed for is the lack of bipartisan cooperation. And here you have sitting before you tonight Representative Lanning and Representative Morrow representing this bill in the House, working collaboratively in a bipartisan way with counterparts over in the Senate doing the same thing and working with the governor's office to try to find a way to keep what many Minnesotans will view as an asset to our state. We know that there's jobs that are connected to this. We know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done with this, and I concur that we need to bring this out of this committee, move it through the process in a bipartisan way to be able to put it on the House floor so that everyone who is elected by the people in the state of Minnesota can have their say on the Minnesota Vikings stadium.
Representative Skelzy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad to hear you say that this is a jobs bill, because I certainly hope, and I'm not going to vote for this bill, but I certainly hope that everyone that's voting for this as a jobs bill is going to give Governor Dayton a large bonding bill, $775 million, which is what he's requested, because that's how to create jobs that are done in a fair manner all over the state. This is new money in this bill. I don't think anyone should lose sight that this is new money, and we've been trying to balance the budget with a deficit. We've been borrowing from our school kids. This is new money. It's just like Christmas. So we're going to expand gambling. It's going to come into the general fund. It's going to be dispersed. That's general fund dollars, and it's new money. And so we should never lose sight of the fact that we currently owe our school kids $2.4 billion. And we've got, according to our February forecast, we have a projected deficit in the next biennium of $1.2 or $3 billion. We've got, and we've just added another $300 million today in Ways and Means. So we're continually ratcheting up. We've got, if you add up the figures today, it's $3.9 billion that we owe. So here we are, where it's like you owe money on your credit cards and you're going to go get a part-time job and give it to your brother-in-law so that he can take a trip around the world. Come on, let's pay our bills. Let's pay off our bills. This is new money. Could pay off what we owe our school kids. And so it's something you have to think about. I did vote for, across the aisle, I voted for the bill to start paying off the school shift. And I think that was the right thing to do. I think this would be the right thing to do if we would take this new money and pay our school kids.
Representative Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to talk about other potential bills. I think we've made this proposal better. I want to thank Representative Lanning, Representative Morrow. Tremendous amount of work here, and it's a topic that's been kicked around for many, many years, and I'm relatively new to the picture, so to speak. I think we've made it better. I think we've answered some of the objections or some of the criteria that pertain particularly to our committee. I think we've answered my questions there. I'm torn. One way I think that this should go before the people or before the total House floor. But there are things in this bill that I just cannot support. And by passing it tonight, even without recommendation, I am giving recommendation by voting for it. So I have real trouble voting for it. It is expanding gaming. It is using tax dollars to fund a private enterprise. And it goes under the premise that stimulus money creates long-term jobs. And I think that that is a fallacy, and I think the last 3 years have basically said that. So I'm going to have to think pretty hard here on the vote with a roll call vote, but I have some real reservations on passing this tonight.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar perception as you, Representative Hancock. I mean, this issue of voting without recommendation, it's like punting, to use a football term. And, let's be clear, a yes vote is supporting this bill as it is, as amended, and a no vote is opposing it. And so it's Chris Cluey's job to punt. Our job is to take tough votes on tough issues. And this is tough. But I have ongoing concerns, as I've had for years, that we can do a much broader net in terms of capturing private money to support this facility. I think the business community can do more. The Vikings can do more. There can be private loans. I've outlined 3 excellent stadiums and 3 wonderful cities that have done it with anywhere from 80 to 90% private funding. We can do that here, and we can build a facility perhaps without a roof that would accomplish that. I share the concerns about gaming. We had some amendments here that help on the local control issue, but there's still a lot of usurping of local control in this bill. That's a huge problem. So I'm going to be voting no, and let's just be clear that the without recommendation, this is still voting to move the bill forward, and I don't think we should be doing that tonight.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill's a tough one. I appreciate that that it would mean a lot of spending in my city, in what I would say is our city, the state city. I appreciate that this project would create a lot of jobs, which I think our economy really needs. But I am torn that public financing at a time when, for example, my husband, who's a school teacher, has class sizes approaching 40, it doesn't add up for me, and especially because that public financing is achieved through the expansion of gambling, which I have ambivalencies about, and I feel like there are other ready approaches that we're not deciding to take on. So I'm going to be voting no, but yeah, I guess that's it.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do support this bill. I do have some concerns, and I've expressed these with the author, some consternation about the expansion of gambling that's included in the bill, but I look at this as a net win for many workers across the state who right now are sitting home wondering how they're going to pay their bills. When this was the day that this went to the Commerce Committee, earlier in that day I had a call from a carpenter who I've known for a lot of years who needs 11 weeks worth of work to lock down his pension. And he's been looking for a job for 3 years and hasn't worked because of the state of this economy. And this is who I'm voting for this bill for. The 7,000 jobs, that the construction job this is going to create is going to put a large portion of our working people back to work so they can pay their bills, they can keep their houses, they can keep food for their kids, and keep clothes on their kids' backs. This is what this bill is about. This is the type of bill we need to do when our economy is the way it is. This is a jobs bill. This is the type of jobs bill that the state can do. I mean, a lot of the other stuff that we can do, tweaking tax benefits for corporations or tax benefits for employers, may create a few jobs, but this is legitimate jobs that we're creating today if we pass this bill, and I'm voting for this bill. I think it's something we need to do. We need to move this forward. Is it a perfect bill? I don't think there's any perfect bill we ever pass out here, but this thing needs to go forward. It still needs to be worked on, and we need to allow that to happen. That's why I'm moving to vote this out of this committee today.
Any other comments from members? I'll turn it over to the two chairs for some parting thoughts before we go to a vote.
Well, great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for what's now been almost a 4-hour discussion, which I say that in a positive way. Certainly a bill and a project and a proposal of this type needs a lot of discussion. And I'd ask you to think about that a little bit as you vote. And I certainly respect the arguments that have been made both ways. But it's the committee processes that allowed the vetting of this. It's the committee process that allowed the discussion. It's a committee process, even in here tonight, which has allowed amendments, which has made the bill better. I'd also direct you, in Commerce we made some changes, but in this committee you made fundamental changes to the bill which were within your purview, considering the city charter and the referendum. You have addressed many of the local government control issues that were brought to the table here tonight. The concerns of avoiding a vote, the concerns of bypassing voters. You've changed the bill to address those local government concerns. I would ask you to think about the fact that you actually did your work appropriately. And now the question is, should the bill go to the next committee, which would be taxes, to talk about the tax issues? Just a couple other comments that I would have. And Representative Hornstein and I have had a great deal of time to talk about this, and I certainly respect Representative Hornstein how you plan to vote as you stated. But there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind as we vote. Comparisons between the Twin Cities and other cities, what they did on stadiums, are very dangerous to make unless you look at all the numbers. So when you look at the three most recent stadiums, New York, with the Jets and the Giants, mostly private financing. But it's private financing of the very type that some have criticized. It's the selling of personal seat licenses to businesses and wealthy people who could afford to pay that share. You look then at Texas, and you look at the stadium in Dallas, and Jerry Jones didn't write a big check, I don't think. I think what he did was he sold personal seat licenses. You look at the Silicon Valley and the 49ers going to Santa Clara, how are they paying for their stadium? Personal seat licenses. If Representative Lanning and I thought that we could fund a stadium in Minnesota through personal seat licenses, he and I would be the first two guys out there hawking the tickets and trying to sell those licenses. But the fundamental fact that we have found out is we cannot fund a stadium in Minnesota through personal seat licenses. Sure, we can raise some money. But I just want to be clear, Representative Hornstein, in terms of writing it 100% private money, when we look at the private money in some of the stadiums you mentioned, what it really was passing the cost on to people who could pay it, and they had enough people who could pay it and wanted to pay it, that they didn't need a great deal of public money. So we just have to be very clear about our situation here in Minnesota, what our options are. But that doesn't mean that these concerns aren't well taken. Heck, we would both like to see a higher number on the private side. Help us get there. But I don't know that voting the bill down gets us there. Another comment, though. A number of folks have mentioned, and I want to be clear, as someone who teaches, who has a wife who teaches, who is a school board chair, if I really thought that this deal overall was taking from K-12 schools, I would be saying no. But the number that, and I know I say it a lot, but the number that we forget is $802 million in what the state collects in income tax directly from this venture. And as Mr. Mondale said, even after you take what the state pays for this stadium, The state makes $140 million more in state income tax than it pays for the stadium. So I just want to be very clear that when we talk about the general fund, and the comments about the general fund were right on, about money going in, money going out. Money will not be in the general fund if we lose the team. And remember, I had 5 points. That was my point number 2. If you think the team is going to stay for 30 years in the Metrodome, I certainly understand the position. But if you think the team won't play in the Metrodome for 30 years, we need to do something if we want to maintain that quality of life. So, members, I know you've got a very difficult vote. And I know that Representative Lanning and I will work with all of you and the other members of the legislature to continually try to improve this bill. And I'd like to thank you for listening to our arguments and our evidence tonight.
Representative Lanning?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for a very thoughtful and respectful discussion. You've asked lots of good questions, raised valid points for us to consider. And as Representative Morrow said, I hope we would have an opportunity to continue to make improvements to this bill to further satisfy any concerns that people have. But as I said at the outset, members, this issue has been before the Minnesota legislature now for almost 7 years. And there have been 4 bills. And as I said earlier, I've been involved in all 4 bills. This is by far and away the best proposal that the legislature's had before it to consider. This issue has captured the headlines. And I have often said, I want to get this issue off the front page. I want us to get more attention to a whole host of other issues. I'm carrying the pension bill. I wish we could get as much public interest in pensions as I have, and that we're trying to do to address that issue. But the media, of course, is very much tuned in on this issue. Members, the only way this issue is going to go away is if we can get it to the floor and either vote it up or down. That's the only way this issue is going to go away. And if it stalls here tonight, I can assure you that it's going to be one of the top issues in the fall campaign. All of you that run for re-election are going to be continuing to deal with this issue. The next legislative session is going to continue to deal with it. 2 years ago, in 2010, the bill of that year stalled in this committee. And look where we are. We're back again after 2 years of trying to deal and address this issue because it never got to the House floor, it never got to the Senate floor to resolve it. A couple other things I want to say. Please take seriously what Representative Morrow has said about potential lost revenue. You know, there's all this focus about what is the public investment here. Consider what the public loses if that team is no longer here. They're pretty staggering numbers that Representative Morrow has outlined, and that Mr. Mondale has put forward, that our investment over the life of this will actually turn a profit for the state of Minnesota. And in addition, we'll have that additional, all of those revenues that are saved. A couple of other things. Questions about, well, the team really ought to be putting in more. I remind you, and this point hasn't been made yet, the team is now offering $200 million more than where they started. Through all the negotiations that we've had, we've driven up the team's contribution by $200 million of private money going to this. And, you know, to this, also, what often gets lost is this facility is owned by the people of Minnesota. This will not be owned by the team, by the Vikings. They're not going to own this. The people of Minnesota will own it, just as it's owned now by the public, the Metrodome. And let me illustrate this. Representative Hancock, you're a businessman. I know you understand these issues, but let's say that you own a building and I'm leasing the building from you, and I come to you and say, you know, that building that you own, that I'm leasing now, is not enabling me to do the kind of revenue that I need to make my business function and be profitable. And so, Mr. Hancock, I've got an offer for you. My offer is, I will, if you'll be willing to have a new building, I will pay for half of the cost of that building over the next 30 years, and you'll continue to use it for 10 days out of the year, and I'll use it for all the other events, the other days of the year. As a business proposition, isn't that a proposition that would be a little hard for a business person to turn away? I mean, you get a brand new facility. The other party, the people leasing the building, are paying half of the cost, and you'll continue to use it as you have used. Members, this is not a bad deal for Minnesota. I think it's a good deal for Minnesota, and I sure hope that you are willing to let this bill continue to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you're Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Lanning and Representative Morrow. I'm not going to vote for your bill today. I appreciate you coming forward today. Even though I think it was improved by putting the charter language, making that requirement be included in the bill, I have some concerns with other areas that we didn't even have purview of in our committee, and I didn't want to bog this committee down with some of my other concerns. There's several of them. The appropriation bonds are one, just the funding source. I have some real concerns with it. And more importantly, I think one of the things that I think is really important as you go forward, I'm not sure what the vote is going to be tonight. I don't know if anybody knows what the vote is going to be. But I think that this bill going forward, for it to be successful, it has to have broad bipartisan support. And that starts tonight. It means that the vote is going to have to come some from the right and some from the left. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but if this bill is going to be successful, either here or in the next committee or on the floor, I think that it's going to take that. Because if this is truly a state priority, I think the bill needs some work, but I think there needs to be support coming from both sides. So having said that, are we ready for a vote? Representative Nelson will renew his motion that House File 2810 be recommended to pass as amended without recommendation to taxes. The clerk will take the roll.
Representative Pepin.
No.
Representative Murray.
Pass.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Beard.
Aye.
Representative Green.
Nay.
Representative Hancock.
Nay.
Representative Hornstein.
No.
Representative McFarland.
Aye.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Aye.
Representative Plum.
Pass.
Representative Sanders.
Yes.
Representative Scalzi.
No.
Representative Simon.
No.
Representative Erdahl.
Yes.
Representative Winkler.
No.
Representative Murray.
Pass.
Representative Quam.
No.
Representative Murray.
No.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail. This meeting is adjourned.